and hone those sentences, make it sing. But the trouble is, when you're a sub-editor, you're used to polishing as you go. So I couldn't do that because I would feel uncomfortable knowing that something I just left wasn't perfect, in my eyes. So I couldn't go on that way, and I had to do it this way. And people would say to me, "You're crazy," but that's just the way I did it. And in the end, I got there. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But that's one of the sort of drawbacks of the trade, I suppose, is that you learn how to do things in a certain way, and that kind of works for me. But I've always, like I said, I've been doing it for 20 odd years now, so I've always been sub-editing and writing, and not always on sport, not always on cricket either. But I think having to write in different tones for different publications and on different subjects sort of rounds you out as a writer as well, because you can draw on a lot more different expressions and ways of putting together stories as well, because one magazine might have a certain style that you have to adhere to, or it might have a certain way of structuring things, but the newspaper will have a different style and structure again, depending on which one it is. So I suppose that's been the benefit of my
that's an interesting. You've touched on an interesting point there. So the idea of style. When you're sub-editing or writing for someone else, if it's advertising copy or if it's even autobiography writing or any of those things, you have to sort of adopt a different persona, that of your audience or the editorial style of the publication you're in. But when you start to write your own books, it's you, even if the subject matter is very relevant to a particular group or a particular audience. It's your way of putting it across. So I think one thing I'd like to ask you both is your books are or the books certainly the ones I've been reading have similarities and differences. One is very much about a history of a certain type of art or craft or of a team. So Anindo, perhaps you're more the historian, but you're a storyteller in the way you bring that game history across. Actually, you're also a historian in that you've picked a very specific, the current book, The Unforgiven, is sort of politically charged. It's sociologically charged with so many different sort of depths about those West Indian cricketers. But again, you're essentially telling a history story through multiple personalities. So in some ways, the books have similarities there. Sure. So anyway, that's kind of a long-winded way of asking the question, which is, how do you evolve, Ashley, your own style and way of your own storytelling so that you feel this is me, even though you're telling the story of something else?
Sure. I think at some point you have to back yourself and back your experience and back your way of looking at the world. Otherwise, there's no point in writing a book or a long form article. I mean, you have to trust that what you're writing about and your perspective is unique in some way and is valuable. I mean, there are many times when you're writing something and you feel that isn't the case. And that can kind of freak you out as well. I mean, there was a time here when I was doing Lawrence Rowe's chapter, and I could not get past the first paragraph, and I was sitting right here, right where I am now. And it was a lovely summer's day. I was looking outside and wishing I was outside. And I just couldn't get... And I found that there were 3 or 4 different options for the next paragraph where I could go with the story, each chapter, and they all seemed quite appealing, but when I'd start them, they wouldn't work, and it was just this utter sense of frustration, and I just let out this primal roar. It was like, "Ugh!" And it didn't work, by the way, but I had to go on, and even, I've got a book here from Neville Cardis, his autobiography.
Yeah.
And it's got some great stuff in here, because obviously he wrote for the Manchester Guardian, but there's interesting bit here, which I really related to, when he said, the Manchester Guardian was a great but dangerous school for young journalists. It made us so word and phrase conscious that sometimes we suffered the embarrassment of the centipede, which one day became aware of the complexity and delicacy of its muscular organisation and reduced itself more or less to permanent immobility by wondering which foot to put forward next. Well, that's where I was at with the Lawrence Road chapter, and to move on to the next part of the narrative, you know, I had to take a chance and believe in myself and get on with it. You know, at some point you have to bite the bullet, and that's ultimately what I did. So, yeah, that's kind of how I approach things, Tony. But usually with a lot more, with a little more success than I had with Rowan in that beginning.
What finally unblocked the start to the Lawrence Road chapter then? What was the critical moment that you went from blank page to you felt you were onto something? Stephen King said the scariest moment is always just before you start. After that, things can only get better. And he wrote a few books.
Yeah, he did, yes. I think I went out and had a walk and experienced some of that sunshine, came back and just looked at the first thing I had written, which is often the best thing in a way, because you come to you're closer to being pure about the subject when you approach it. And I went with that, and it just started to roll. I knew a lot about him obviously anyway, because I'd researched him so much. I'd interviewed him, I'd seen him, I knew the man, you know. And the thing about my book was, even though it's well structured in that there are 20 chapters on different guys that went on the Rebel tours, each chapter itself, I didn't have a particular structure for it. You know, it would just sort of happen, and I would just sort of work it as I was going. You know, once again, the sort of the polish as you go thing. You know, I couldn't move on if the stats weren't right and the words weren't right. You know, like you were saying before. You know, if the stats aren't right, you can't go.
Well, the rigor certainly comes out, and actually, you've said something there I will come back to.
Yeah.
Because it's the 20 different people. I have a slight feeling that each chapter gets to the heart of those personalities, so it's slightly different in its feel, because I think you almost inhabit the trials, tribulations of each of those people. But I'm going to hold that thought, because I was going to ask Anindo the same question. You know, for you, as I say, a kind of a historian. I don't know if you'd like to be called a historian, but you're a storytelling historian in cricket. Yeah. But tell me about the inspiration for you, because it's not just the Wizards and the Story of Indian Spin. You've written about Don Bradman. You've written about the Gentleman's Game and the old style. You know, we imbue the history of cricket. You know, even when none of us were born, even me, who's older than you two, you somehow in your mind have a vision of what cricket was like that is actually probably black and white and men running around impossibly quickly. And yet you feel like you were there because you've read so much. So tell me a little bit about your inspiration to get pen to paper for your first book, perhaps, Anindo.
Yeah, it's interesting, Tony. You say that what you just said, because the first book, although it's not the first book I published, the first book I actually started working on was Spellbinding Spells. That's the one which Kersey asked me to encourage me to write. It just took a while to write, so by that time I had The Gentleman's Game, which was almost like an experiment, because The Gentleman's Game was more a collection of articles that I had written earlier, and I sort of polished them and I put it out there to see what the response to my writing would be while I was still writing Spellbinding Spells. I wanted some feedback, if you like. So it's interesting that a lot of people, even today, are writing back to me and telling me that they love A Gentleman's Game, which is nice to know. But that's the reason why I wrote it. And then when I started writing Spellbinding Spells, it was quite interesting because for some reason, I decided to be very bold. And I said, I'm going to write this in a manner which I have not used earlier. And in line with what you were talking about, that where if if I can call myself a quasi historian, just because I guess I read so much of it and enjoy it. I actually thought that a unique approach would be if I were to write a book where I'm visualizing what's going on in front of me, and I'm writing the entire story in the present continuous. So, which was an absolute experiment, because it's a 300 and whatever 50-page book. And it had to be right because the facts in there were very important. It was the first book ever written on single bowling spells. So no one had really dissected a single bowling spell and, ranked them. So I have, I think, 6 chapters with 7 of the top bowling spells, which first I had to make sure, cross-referencing, that I didn't make a mistake. And thankfully, in the last 4 years, no one's come back to me to say I've made a mistake. But, maybe someone will someday.
Well, you're the reference.
Yeah,
you say it's true, it's true.
Well, they'd have to go back to a lot of archives to prove me wrong on that one. Because for the 19th century spells that I wrote about, a lot of them, I have to say, are quasi-conjecture. Because, you only have the scoreboards. There's nothing else. And you look at those scoreboards and then you try and cross-reference a bit of writing from somewhere about the match, and you try to make up your mind as to whether it was logically a single spell or not. And then I thought that if modern readers read it, they can't relate to the same way to an 1890 test match as I would. So why don't I narrate it like someone would watch a match on television? As if it's happening in front of them. So my entire book is written in the present continuous. And I can tell you I was one tired man by the time I finished.
Well, that's definitely something we're going to come on. Now, you both said something here which I think is really interesting. It's almost as though you're cricket statisticians and historians first, and then the writing wraps around that. And is that perhaps something that's sort of almost unique to the sport that we have in common, because it is so incredibly rich in data to start with?
I think if I may just take that one for first. I think it is unique, but then it's a huge challenge as well, because if you only depend on the statistics, you're going to get a critic or multiple critics coming and telling you that you're just regurgitating statistics, right? And that's not the point. The point is to tell the story that the statistics suggest. And I think therein lies the art, right?
But isn't that what Neville Cardus was famously so good at doing? He didn't rely upon just the stats and the chronology of the game that he was talking about. Quite often he wasn't even there. The line I've always loved, it gets trotted out on, probably shows like this, I don't know. Trent Bridge, a lotus land for batsmen, a place where it was always afternoon and 360 for 2. I mean, again, we'll come back to it, but I'm not sure you get that sort of language. Ashley, what about for you? Historian, statistician, wrapped in prose.
Yeah. I think that. I've always had a head for stats because cricket is unmerciful in that way, and that everyone that plays in a game is ranked. Where you come in, when you bowl, the score you get, everything that you do is accounted for. So it's a good basis from which to start when you want to historically analyse something. But as Anindya was saying before, it's just the bones. You've got to put the flesh on it, and that's the real art. But it's just so important in cricket as well to get those stats right, because they can be interpreted in so many ways, and if you haven't got the right one to work with in the beginning, you're not only doing the record books a disservice, you're deceiving your readers. So yeah, you have to get those right. But I would consider myself a writer before I would consider myself a.
Well, yeah, it's interesting you say that, because if you know, when you think about the Unforgiven, interestingly enough, there are stats in there. Of course, there are.
Yeah,
and
that's why I put the scorecards at the end. You know,
you
because,
did.
Because it's important to me. Because if I read a book and I've got all this stuff, I want to be able to refer exactly to what happened.
Any cricket fan would be lying if they weren't worrying. Well, like, yeah, but what was the scorecard that day? Who got how many wickets? I mean, they still will do that. But, and again, I think this is a commonality probably between both of you and books of yours that I've been lucky enough to read, is there's a huge amount of personality and emotion, quite raw emotion in perhaps more in your case, Ashley, around the personalities, the issues that they were going through, the challenges, the moral challenges that they were facing. So stats alone are never going to tell that story. What was the point at which you said there is a really deep seam to mine here that goes far beyond just cricket and led you to that book?
Well, it probably was just meeting Richard Austin in the first place and finding him in the gutter. You know? I mean, I didn't see him on the cricket field racking up a century or taking 5 wickets or making a spectacular catch. I saw him in the gutter drinking rum from a plastic Coke bottle and pleading to me for money to feed his cocaine habits. So the story could never be about the statistics, or I was talking to a guy today from my hometown. I think I told you before, Tony, that's doing a story from Newcastle here, and I actually played cricket with him as a kid, and he was saying that the book is more about the decisions that people make in their lives and the ramifications and how they reconcile them later in life, if they ever do. So yeah, that always had to be the focus for me. I had to get the other stuff right, because to not do that would be to
the price of the ticket.
Fall out with so many cricket fans, and also myself, because I got to get these things right. Because if you want to get your argument right, stats have to be right. So but the story is about people's lives and how people make calls on their lives that sometimes are wrong and sometimes can lead down very dark alleys. So that's more what it's about, and also the political ramifications. There are so many variables, other themes that sort of interweave there, and it got so complex at one stage that I just thought I couldn't do it. It was I just thought there's just so much going on in this book. It was doing my head in. But I'll just quickly give you a little anecdote. It was Christmas night 2018, just before Christmas, and I was having lunch with a mate up in a suburb here called Marrickville, which is in Sydney's inner west, and we were having some Vietnamese, and I was telling him about my problems about the book, and I was halfway through it, and I didn't think I was going to make it to the end, and we were outside, and I looked up at a building across the road, and there was a mural there, and it was a mural of a picture of Nelson Mandela, and it had a big painted picture.
Hello everybody, we're back.
Hello.
I assume we're back.
Yes, I think we are.
Good.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Ian.
Great, fantastic.
So anybody as surprised as me that New Zealand was so positive in the first session of the day? I did expect them to continue, perhaps be a little bit more outgoing than they were at the end of day 4, but I didn't expect to be so much sort of going into T20 mode. So fair play to them.
Why not?
Well, why didn't they do it last night?
I don't know, but not to say this is pointless, but this is a warm up for their final against India, isn't it? So maybe their focus is on that rather than really getting a result here. They'll want a result here, but I think they're more focused on getting decent practice ahead of that match against India.
Yeah, I must admit I was surprised, but I guess that is the recent history of New Zealand cricket, to take the bull by the horn, so to speak. I suppose one other observation is it's perhaps more the modern method to start at pedestrian pace in the complete sure knowledge that you can grind from first gear to fifth gear when time allows. If you think back to Stokes' innings at Headingley as the obvious example.
Batters are better at getting to fifth gear these days,
I
if there is a fifth gear.
I do take that point, but I think the difference was that Stokes had no time pressure, whereas there is time pressure in this match due to having lost the first day and the ludicrous over rate that umpires allow. I think it was around double the scoring rate this morning than it was last night, and you could understand a little bit of a change of heart, but it does seem to have gone from one extreme to the other. But we've got jingles to do, haven't we?
No, hang on. Yeah, New Zealand have declared.
New
We've
Zealand
also
declared.
got news, yes. They've declared.
Wow! Heavens above. Well, what can you say? Well, you can say at Guerrilla Cricket on Twitter and one or two other places as well. I'd like to have your views on this. I'm absolutely delighted. I do think it's
bold.
overly positive.
I'm taken back to Gary Sobers in 1968, and the only match they lost in that series against England was when Sobers came up with a ridiculously generous declaration.
Yes, I think there are some teams where they're declaring now that one or two people might be very interested in such things as what was it? There was a jacket, wasn't there, involved when there was declarations. I had no problem, by the way, with Hansi Cronje doing those declarations in that fantastic game they had in South Africa. I thought it was fantastic that they got the game on, and so it'd be hypocritical of me to say otherwise. Here, I think the difference is that this is a two-match series. It's 1-0. It's 0-0. There's one match to go, and it seems an awful lot of risk to me to put England back in the game here. But in the main, I'm a firm believer in you have to be prepared to lose a match to win a match. So I've got to be consistent, and I've got to say, well done, Kane Williamson, opening up the game.
By the way, 273 to win in 75 overs at 3.64 runs per over. That's what England need.
Ooh,
I mean, it's not like the deck is doing loads, isn't it? I don't know. I'm slightly getting the flavour that both sides aren't treating this as a 100% kosher test match, to be honest. I don't think if WTC points were on the line, maybe they wouldn't have declared at lunch, or if maybe everything had been escalated in terms of importance a touch more. This feels like a bit of a shot to nothing. They feel if they lose, they lose.
Well, I think New Zealand, more than England, won't want to lose going into the World Test Championship final. However, yes, I agree with you. I wonder if it's not. It's a two-test series, and that's it.
That's what slightly worries me, in that I'm all for teams trying to win test matches and be bold in their declarations, but what I don't want to see, I'm very keen to avoid seeing, is somehow this test being a warm-up for a World Test Championship final, which to me is still a confection. Test cricket stands in its own right. I heard someone this morning saying something along the lines of, it's good for test matches to have context with the World Test Championship. A test match's context is the fact that it is a test match. It doesn't need any more context. And some people may disagree with it. They're entirely at their discretion to do so.
Probably the New Zealand and Indian cricket teams probably disagree with it.
Well, do they? Do they really? Probably. Do they?
I think it's a big deal.
Do they really want to say we're happy to lose at Lords in order to win the World? In order to increase our chances of winning the World Test Championships by a
Well, I don't think it's a
notional
case of
percentage?
that. I don't think it's a case of that. I think it's a case of we are focusing on the World Test Championship. It's more important.
maybe
Well, it's more, Gary, it's more important than there's 2 Test series.
well, I don't think so. I really
Well,
don't.
it
because,
is. It's
well, I
the
think
World
if
Test
you-
Championship.
If you're saying one Test match or one World Test Championship is more important than bilateral series and
No, then this.
stuff like this.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying than this. It's more important to these to New Zealand. I mean,
They-
India haven't even bothered to play anybody.
Yeah. Well, they might. It might be. I'm not going to disagree with you, Nestle boy, but I think that'll be disappointing, and that's what I was keen to avoid with the World Test Championship. That it becomes a bit like the Rugby World Cup, where everything's a warm up for the Rugby World Cup. But we've got jingles to play.
He's got the stride of a champion from Surrey. His mustache is ugly, got a shot finally, and his name is Rory Burns.
I suppose another way of looking at it is that New Zealand have only won once at Lords in 18 attempts, and they may feel they may feel declaring at lunch is their best chance. They do not. They feel that England's batting lineup is sufficiently fragile that they genuinely think they won't be able to get 273 in 2 sessions, which is a fairly legitimate reading as well.
Well, it's Saudi to open up, and on off stump, Rory Burns defends, no run.
It's only a whimsical notion to fly with Tim Saudi here tonight. I probably won't fly with Tim Saudi. Then again, I just might.
I suppose we really, as you say, Gary, we really can't complain when someone does declare a bit too early. We 9 times out of 10, sitting in our armchairs, we're saying, why have they declared so late?
Well, maybe this ball is defended and there is no run. I mean, epics like the Shy Hope chase against England, they're epics because they happen rarely, and the win is so amazing to have chased down over 300. The same when the new lad scored the double century, Kyle, somebody will remind me of his name, for the West Indies recently.
Mayers.
Yeah,
Mayers.
And if it becomes not so much the norm, as this next ball is bowled by Saudi and this is defended and there is no run, if it becomes, this is all about context, if it becomes something that happens fairly regularly because declarations become as generous as this one, then it devalues, I think, the whole lot. There is importance in rarity in sport, particularly perhaps if you grow up with English and British sports, unlike American sports, you know, where there's lots of baskets and there's lots of points in American football. We prefer, I think, a little bit more of the rarity as this ball goes through to the keeper. So I think when I first heard of the World Test Championship, that was my fear, that it would become like rugby, where, as I say, almost everything seems to be a warm-up for the World Cup. And if all Test matches just become ways of getting into form for the World Test Championship, once you've qualified or once you're with the qualification, then I think that diminishes the game as a whole. But there are different views.
But it is the World Championship of Tests. That's the whole point of it, isn't it?
If you can construct something which has weight and merit and call it the World Test Championship, yes.
But it's all constructed.
It is all constructed, but when home advantage is such an enormous factor, certainly in New Zealand getting to the final, and arguably India too, I think the construction is not quite good enough in order to make that statement with the weight that you're suggesting, as this ball is defended and there is no run.
I'm not suggesting any way. I'm saying that this 2 series against England does not matter to the New Zealanders as much as the World Test Championship. And it shouldn't.
Yeah, well, I say it should, because I think tests and test series, New Zealand have not have won once, I think, at Lords in their history.
This will happen and be forgotten about, whereas the World Test Championship won't, the first one, against India.
I'd be flabbergasted if anybody remembers who the World Test Champions are in 2 years' time. As
I
this
wouldn't
ball
be.
is very full, and it squirts off the outside edge of Rory Burns. England are away with the ball going all the way to the backward point boundary down the hill for the first of these.
1 2 ka 4 4 2 ka 1. My name is Lakhan. My name is Lakhan.
I guess what I would say is, and I'm sure social media can correct me, or maybe Gary on this as you can, but I can't remember such a generous declaration in the first test of the series.
No, I can't. And there's a little bit of weather about, but you can't take weather into consideration when you're making decisions in cricket, because it can come and go, especially in early June in England, or mid-June in England.
Knuckles waving.
Yeah, because there's a jingle.
Patient batting. He made huge runs, the rumours spread by word of mouth. This guy's really talented. Dominic Sibley. Dominic Sibley.
And he'll be up against a bowler, as yet unjingled, but we'll soon have him. And Dominic Sibley meets the ball with a straight bat, no run.
There might be school children out there with this.
That's the story of how Kyle Jameson became a man.
And we'll be coming to your tweets in between deliveries and at the end of the over, because I'm sure you'll have plenty to say about this surprising development in St John's Wood. And an entirely different surprising development in St John's Wood. I'm going there for an opera tonight. As Kyle Jameson is in, and this is through to the keeper, no run.
What opera would that be, Gary?
I can't remember. It's at the Cockpit Theatre, which is only about a 10-minute walk from Lord's.
Is that all masked up and socially distanced still, Gary?
I think it is. I think you're supposed to wear a mask in the audience, but socially distanced. So there'll be gaps between people, and they're singing in the round at the Cockpit Theatre. So, yes, I'm looking forward to it. Jameson is in, and this is edged, but drops well in front of Ross Taylor at first slip, and there is no run.
I guess
Ravi
when you
Nair-
think of... so go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, Ravi Nair says a splendid and perfectly timed declaration by New Zealand. England to crawl to tee and attempt to hit out afterwards.
Yeah, that sounds entirely feasible. I was thinking back to, I suppose, Mark Butcher at Headingley 20 years ago. But, Australia had already won that series, 3-0 up. And a bit of a shrug of the shoulders from Australia. Okay, you can have that one.
This one's through to the keeper, and there is no run. That was Adam Gilchrist's first test. But from memory, England needed about 340, I think, in that. I mean, they had more time to get them, but...
It was a very unlikely win, but Butcher played the match of his life. And
yeah, he made 173, I think he made, in that match. I'm wondering, when this would be one for the tweeters, as Jameson's in again. This ball's defended, no run. When was the last time so low a target as 273 was set with 2 sessions of play? In fact, slightly more than 2 normal sessions of play, because 2 sessions of play would be 60 overs. There's rather more than 60 overs. I wonder when last that was set. Somebody will come back to me and say, it's been done 8 times in India in the last 5 years or something. But I wonder that simple equation of as low a target with as high as number of overs left. I'd be very interested to see. This ball goes past the outside edge, but it goes through very low to BJ Watling, who accepts the ball.
Yeah, it must be under 4
and
over.
England are 4 without loss, 269 away from what would be a sensational and remarkable win.
Jay Grover says he hates loud noises and large crowds. He's the anti-Nestle. I don't like being in large crowds. I like large crowds at sporting events. when I'm watching. Sean Barry says, declared more like McCullum than Kane. Looks brave to me, but good on Kane. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. The rain has gone. It's a bit of blue sky, Dan Keevy, so we'll keep an eye on that. It's quite humid where I am here in Essex. I don't know, it's not that far away from London. I'm getting a wee bit of a Toby Jones vibe from Forthy, says Jay Grover. Mint, nearly typed Toby Young by mistake, which would have been bang out of order. Yeah, it would. He would not talk to you after that.
Damn right. Here's Southey in, and this ball's through to the keeper, Neuran.
Was that Toby Young was the comparison, was it? Was that right?
No. Hang on, I've got me
Toby Jones.
Toby Jones, the actor.
Oh, okay. I can kind of live with that. I mean, I'm always quite happy if it's Hugh Grant, but I'll go with Toby Jones. He's a very fine actor.
He's a brilliant actor, yeah. And he's not a twat like Toby Young.
If we get time, I'll tell a story against myself about an actor comparison just after this point.
Okay.
Southey round the wicket, and this clipped into the leg side, but there's a short mid-wicket, very much saving one, and one is indeed saved.
Yes, there was I was in the office, and this co-worker kept stopping me at the coffee machine. Who is it? Who do you remind me of? What actor is it? And I was thinking, it's got to be Hugh Grant. Come on. And then finally she said, I've got it. It's Wallace from Wallace and Gromit.
Oh my God. Well, it's a good job you didn't meet one of my previous co-workers, Paul, who actually looked like Gromit. And that
I suppose
obviously
Gromit would have
became
been
his
worse.
nickname. You know, he didn't sound like him;
Yes.
he just looked like him. And I used to always see him. So I used to go, "Hello, Gromit." But bless him, he didn't mind. He didn't mind.
I think.
Oh, no,
I think
you've got a bit of a vibe of the sort of nice English vicar about you, Wolfie.
Oh, that's. I always rather like the idea of being a vicar.
There you go.
This ball's through
Except
to the keeper, Neuran.
Except I'm an atheist, so that was the problem.
Yeah, that's going to stop you.
I looked up an old boss of mine, and she's a celebrant for the British Humanist Association, who I believe kind of play the role of vicars for those who are atheists. So if you want to be sent off out of this world, the British Humanist Association can give you a celebrant who can lead the inverted commas service. Maybe that's your role, Forby.
Oh, thank you, Gary. Yes.
Here's Southey round the wicket, and this ball is defended by Rory Burns, who must feel he's pretty much picking up where he left off yesterday afternoon.
Someone was just saying that Burns has gone from number 8 in the pecking order of English batsmen to number 3 in the space of a day.
Well, there ain't much between 3 and 8 in the English batting pecking order, to be honest. So maybe that's so. Burns has now got 3 centuries opening for England, and the last English opener who has 3 centuries to his name is
Alistair Cook.
Alistair Cook. So plenty of
Now.
track. You have succeeded. This ball is punched by Rory Burns down the ground. He got slightly better timing with that than I expected, and even though it's going marginally uphill towards the pavilion, it's enough to go all the way for one of these.
Quite,
Four it is.
quite extraordinary. Jay Grover says he's been mistaken for Pete Doherty twice.
That's not bad.
Is that because he's hanging around with Kate Moss or something?
I don't know. Maybe Jay is. He's a man of mystery.
True.
8 without loss, England. All the runs scored by Rory Burns with 2 boundaries. This ball is defended and there is no run. It's the end of the over. And your tweets.
Well, I'm astonishingly up to date.
Huh?
YouTube is still on their lunch break, and no one's commenting yet on Facebook. But we've got some viewers on Cricket Tracker India. I'll read them out. Bablu Yadav, Vishal Kumar, Pawan Kumar Jangir, Sajidid Ansari, Jitendra Paswan, Ravi Ranjan Patel, Muhammad Umir, Prince Arif, and Khan Whackers. All very welcome on board. Hope you're enjoying the coverage.
That was Ben Folkes on camera there in one of the boxes as Kyle Jameson gets one to jag away up the hill to Dom Sibley, and there is no run. Ben Folkes looking a bit sort of Bollywood there in the big glasses and film star looks, don't you think?
Is that him there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, golly, yes. Gosh, they're a power
I think
couple.
I'm pretty sure it's Ben Folkes. Not Ben Stokes, he's a different person altogether. But yes, he would be keeping wicket today, were it not for the fact that what did he do? He fell over on the floor coming out of the shower or something.
Bad sock choice.
The bad sock choice, yeah. The bad socks award. Kyle Jameson is in, and this is just defended by Dom Sibley. There is no run, and he goes back to fiddling about with his pre-shot rituals as Paul Collingwood strides around the outer. Collingwood is probably something on the England coaching staff. Is he fielding coach? Is he batting coach? It could be any of those things. Either way, he's down there to keep Mark Wood company in the Geordie Boy Stakes.
He's got a great jingle.
Specialist fielding at point coach.
Mm-hmm. Jameson is in, and Dominic Sibley follows that a little bit. There was a bit of the Dan Lawrence shot about that, except that it was slightly closer to him, but still skewed off the outside edge, roll along the ground to gully where it was fielded. But Jameson will reflect on that, and he might just hang a tempter out there a little wider as Sibley looks to get off the mark. He's faced 9 balls without so doing.
Brian Barish has joined us from all the way from the United States of America. He says, "Good morning, cricket nerds." Good morning, Brian. I hope you're well.
Morning.
Boy.
Australian rules commentator in America.
3 slips in a gully, but that ball is left alone by Dom Sibley. It was the tempter that I was suggesting that Jameson may throw out there, but Sibley was having none of it, and there is no run. I was reading some sort of comment, I think, below the line at The Guardian last night on the train on the way home after my day, which I'll tell you about in a moment. And saying that Sibley's no good and he's rubbish and everything else. He may not have the best technique, but he's right up there in terms of temperament. And temperament is as important as technique in Test cricket, as this ball beats the outside edge there from Sibley. It was a damn good ball from Jameson. It was on a length. It just offered to move away down the slope, and Sibley was beaten. Where do you guys stand on that, on technique and temperament? Because you need both to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, the media are very quick to write off cricketers almost more than any other sport. Would that be fair?
It's not so much the media. I think this was kind of below the line, and Twitter and places like that. Fans who like nothing more to rubbish people.
It builds, doesn't it?
Yeah. But he's never going to have the greatest technique as will Sibley, but he's got good temperament, as indeed as Rory Burns. That was a brute of a ball from Jameson that jumped at Sibley and hit him either on the forearm or on the glove, but he kept it down, and there is no run. It's the end of the over. It's a maiden. England 8 without loss.
Jay Grover says no, there's no Kate Moss with him, but a lot of heroin. You're going back to what you were saying. What impressed me the other day about Devon Conway was the concentration levels.
Yeah,
all the greats. I was watching Federer last night play a German player who was very good.
This ball is
let's replay. Yeah. And Federer's not fit and whatever else, but you could see him concentrating just at the right moments. And the younger, inexperienced lad hasn't learnt that yet. And Federer's 39.
That's a ridiculous ball from Tim Southey, who's fast medium at best, and it absolutely took off, went past Burns, and BJ Watling was in the air and took it at the very highest point of his leap. So quite where that came from, I do not know. No run.
I totally agree with you, Gary. You have to have both, but there are different types of technique and even different types of temperament as well. And you can succeed now in different forms of cricket with very different temperaments and indeed very different techniques as well. But you have to have both to succeed in the long term. But they can vary between individuals.
Yes, I think that's very fair. That's one of the delights of the game, of course. This ball's outside off stump. There is no run. I just think that someone like a Joss Butler is given the thick end of 50 Test matches to work out a technique to play long innings in Test cricket, and to his credit, he has. Maybe he had 40 Test matches to do that. Whereas other players, and gets a lot of support from fans, social media, below the line, at The Guardian and elsewhere, where fans will look at someone doing one of the hardest jobs in cricket, which is opening against new ball bowlers. And if they're not exactly what they think is the best technique, they're on to them. Rory Burns gets one on leg stump and flicks it to Devon Conway at deep square leg and gets himself a single. He now has all 9 of England's runs. Some of it is the aesthetics. Some of it is the kind of reward that comes through, and everybody wants to see Joss Butler make hundreds in Test cricket the way he does in ODIs and T20. But these guys are doing the hardest job here. Let's give them a little bit of support. And neither of them are going to have the greatest technique, but these 2 lads have got a lot of bottle up the top of the order for England.
If it's just aesthetics, then you dismiss Shander Paul, Stephen Smith.
Yeah,
plenty. Larry Gomes, just any number of.
Just look at the stats. That's what I say.
This ball is defended, and there is no run. And
although you'd probably add, wouldn't you, that the stats don't always tell the whole story, in as much as Atherton ended up with an average of 37, but he was opened for a terrible England side all the way through the 90s against the decade of probably the best fast bowling in history.
Well, I think there's only 3 openers. It may even have been Knuckles' stat. Only 3 openers in the last 10 years or something have averaged more than 40. I remember one was Craig Brathwaite. I suppose another one would be Warner, although his average is very much feast or famine. As over the wicket this time, Saudi is in, but he's the right-hander, so he would be over the wicket. Defended, no run. So if you're averaging 35 or so as an opener in Test cricket the last 10 years, you're doing pretty well. And as you say, with the likes of Atherton, you look at his average and you think, well, he must have been an ordinary player. You look at the bowlers he was up against and you find out that he was anything but an ordinary player, just doing an extremely difficult job very well.
And captaining
as well. Yeah. This is Dom Sibley, who's looking to get off the mark, gets one on middle and off, defends. The end of the over, England 9 without loss, their target 273.
I've just been put off by Knackle. He's been down that chicken shop. Haven't you, Knackle? He's got his fried chicken and chips. I'm very jealous. Let's have a look on the old Twitter sphere. Oh my God. Jack Grover signed a beer mat in Gravesend. If only because I wanted to end the conversation. If we could only all do that when Gary says, my day, which I'll tell you about in a moment. So you've signed a beer mat as Pete Doherty. Oh my God.
Well, very briefly, I saw a lot of the cricket yesterday, but I was round at my brother's house in just outside Billericay, and watching it in the summer house there, drinking Pimm's and Lemo, and it was very pleasant. So that was my day yesterday. That's why I wasn't commentating. Well, one of the reasons is for rotation, of course, but the other
is his name Dicky? Is he Billericay Dicky? Is he doing very well?
He's not Billericay Dicky of neither is he a blockhead, although he's a big fan of the Endurian the blockheads, as this is very full and beats the bat of Rory Burns. He played down the Bakerloo line and the ball was on the district line, as Brian Johnston used to say.
District line?
Yeah, it was very nice.
Very good.
Jersey Oaks waiting at the gate in Schiphol for his Heathrow flight. They shouldn't let you in the country at the moment.
Wow,
nothing says
really?
super spreader like a long queue for all UK bound passengers to get their locator and PCR forms checked.
Well, I can tell you that the train carriage that was going down to my brother's was also on its way to Southend, and there were plenty of people in a crowded carriage there as well. This ball goes through to the keeper, and there is no run. Yes, one looks out at the attendance at Lord's there, and one thinks of the attendance for a 40-minute journey on a crowded train yesterday, and think, well, one's allowed and the other isn't. It doesn't doesn't really compute.
Yeah, it's Saturday
honest.
with nice weather going down to the coast in this country, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think people kind of want it, and there's kids
Yeah.
and teenagers and everything else. I understand, but it wasn't much fun on a fairly crowded train in the morning. Not so on the way back. This ball is defended. There is no run. 3 slips waiting for the edge from Rory Burns, and England are
you
following
mentioned,
the. Go on.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that Burns was first English opener to score 300 since Alistair Cook. There's been a lot of openers since Alistair Cook. Can you name the 3 who have scored 200s since him?
Well, Nick Compton's one. For
Yes.
Sure. Adam Lyth got 2, I think.
No, I haven't got live
we
on
only
my
got
list.
I suddenly got a speeded up version of the feed there, but I think it was a ball that went through to the keeper at 84 miles an hour, albeit on the feed it was about 184 miles per hour, as the camera picks out Bruce French, who's wearing Philip Brown, the cameraman's hair, as he goes around with this enormous backpack.
I was going to say, what is he carrying on his back? A sofa?
It's, it does seem, even a German tourist on a crowded train going down to the Greek islands would quail at so large a backpack. I think it's some kind of catching mat or something, isn't it? As Jameson's in again, and he lets that one go, does Burns. It was outside the off stump, but left-handers do tend to leave well from right arm over, and it was indeed a good leave, but scooted along the ground on the way through to BJ Watling. We can see why
I'll
it's
just
hard
finish
to
off-
time the ball. Yeah, go on.
Just finish off the answer to that question. One of them who scored 200s is at the other end now. That's Dom Super.
Yes, super.
And the other one is Keaton Jennings.
Oh, Keaton Jennings, both in India, I think.
Yes, I think that's right.
Yeah. There's been some word about Keaton Jennings. He did make 100 for Lancashire in the last round of matches, but he hadn't scored a century for some time before that, as this ball goes through to the keeper. It's the end of the over. England 9 without loss. Paul Collingwood is the assistant coach, who will soon be stepping up to be coach for the white ball stuff coming up, courtesy of Knuckle.
Andrew Whittaker says, wow, I hope this declaration... I hope that doesn't come back to bite us. I'm assuming he's out in New Zealand. And in reply to that, Greg Wilson says, it's a great declaration, I think. This would be a tough chase on a pitch that is doing quite a lot. Love it, Kane. Going to be an exciting afternoon, he says, weather permitting, that's for sure. MC says, hello there. Stephen Kelk says, afternoon, gents. And MC comes back and says, enjoying watching your stream and enjoying the cricket. That's what we want you to do. Both.
Yeah. I mean, my last word on the declaration is, I think probably 40 more runs, which would have taken about, with the Grandon hint, might have taken sort of 5 overs, get a target of 320 or so. I think that would have been better, as this ball is defended and there is no run. I think that would take 6 overs out of the time if they batted for 4 overs and got, say, 40 runs, and I think that would have tilted things. It would have allowed Kane to stay on the offensive even if England start attacking with slips and so on. But he's cut away that little bit of safety valve. Messi Jevs tells me that would be killing Test cricket if he'd scored 40 runs in 40 overs. I don't think so. As this ball is pushed to mid-off to Kane, who does the fielding there, and there is no run. I'm not asking them to bat on to get 350. I'm just asking them to bat on to get another 40, perhaps.
I think it begins. It's a bit like one of those plot twists. In retrospect, it kind of makes sense when you think about it. Really puts the gauntlet down to a very fragile England side, and really puts them on the back foot.
Yeah, plenty of sportsmen with their positive attitude will say, "Well, here's an opportunity. Now I'm going to take it." But yeah, I mean that's the yin and the yang. That's why we watch the game. As that ball's through to BJ Watling, and there is no run.
I just don't think it would be incorrect of us to complain at an early declaration after all these years of complaining about ones which came 2 hours too late.
Well, Yeah, well, it's a bit. It goes a little bit both ways. The Bear is very keen to tell me when I was saying West Indies have got no chance of chasing this down. He said, "Well, of course they've got a chance. They're favourites. They do this all day, every day in a ODI. Why are we saying they can't do it in a Test match?" He was right and I was wrong. So by that token. It's a beautiful ball from Southey. He does that particularly well. He jumps slightly wide on the crease. I don't know whether BJ Watling gets a little signal for it. He goes slightly wide on the crease, and then the ball comes in at an angle, but with the seam that he holds up ever so slightly pointing to the offside, it just seems away from the batsman. And he hopes to take the edge, but in that case didn't. But that's beautiful bowling. Sibley has 0 from 19 here. And is beginning to look edgy. But as I say, his temperament is excellent, so expect just a nurdle and a nerves settling single in a moment. There's the nurdle. In fact, it's a bit more than a nurdle because it was on leg stump and he timed that beautifully, did Sibley. Excellent temperament and 4 runs to his credit.
It's Nissan She. It's Nissan She.
Leia tells us somewhere in a box she's got beer mat signed by Mambo Kurt, a guy who plays AC/DC, body count, etc. on a Hammond organ.
On a Hammond organ?
I mean, that's a signature to have, isn't it?
It's a unique selling point for sure. As Carlo Ancelotti, going these days by the name of Chris Silverwood on the balcony, claps that. As this is very full, and Sibley punches that to the man scrabbling round from mid-on, perhaps in a one-dayer. That would have been a single. It was Neil Wagner, but they're not yet in single stealing mode. It's the end of the over. England are 13 without loss. We're going to have a change in commentary. We're going to welcome the tones. I was going to say dulcet tones, but anything but dulcet. But they're very welcome tones of Ed Benson. Hello, Ed.
How very dare you, Gary, but it's lovely to hear you.
Boy Benson is here. Whee!
Oh, Nestler's lovely to see you. Messi Jez, lovely to meet you in person.
And you, Ed, as it were.
As it were, exactly. In fact, I'll get onto this later. We're 13 for none as England, as the chase is on. And I believe we've got Knackle with us as well. Are we doing a four-person thing?
Knackle's steering the Starship Enterprise from the...
It does look like that, doesn't it, Gary?
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be
bridge.
Kyle Jamieson into Rory Burns, and he bowls, and that's defended off the back foot into the onside, and there's no run.
I don't know whether you heard us this morning, but we were looking for some Latin phrases. So, Ed, you've got the full lexicon of Latin legal terminology at your fingertips. I'm sure you'll be able to supply us with some.
No, Gary, I have to say, I'm going to disappoint you there. I'm very much of the opinion that we're, as I've said to people before, we're in the courts of England and Wales. And I don't like using Latin phraseology, even when it's a bit cumbersome. I never even use inter alia even.
Yeah, we'll stick to Norman French then. Is that right?
Yeah, quite. Jameson's in. That's defended. And Rory Burns isn't quite sure where it's gone, but it's popped up into the onside on the bounce, and there's no danger there and no run.
I always tend to the view that when commentating, it's best to use a language understood by more than 5% of the listeners.
Well, listeners often complain about that with me, Messi. So and I speak in English.
well, they don't complain about not being able to hear you, though, Ed.
That's true. That's certainly true. That's certainly true.
I'm off to the opera later, Messi Jez, and they say even when they sing in English, you can't understand it there. So.
Oh, that's opera. Don't get me started.
Jamieson's into Burns, and that's crabbily defended onto his pad and dribbles out to the man fielding at gully, and there is no run.
How's it going, Ed? I haven't seen you for ages. I don't know whether you've been doing some IPL or.
No, I've done a few days. I mean, life is pretty weird at the moment, as you can imagine, Gary.
Yes, I can.
But I've been following what's going on with great interest. And if nothing else, this sort of remote working has enabled us to get people like Messi Jez on from presumably Australia. Messi.
Yes, I'm in Perth. Yes, a very long way away.
Very, very long way away. So that fire at the background might not be fake. It might actually be midnight.
It is 9:02 here.
Well, as Burns is defending on the onside, and there's no run. In fact, Messi, I've just come off. The reason I've just joined so late, as Knackle was WhatsApping me, saying, "Where the hell are you?" Effectively, I have just been on a call with my friend who's moved to Newcastle in Australia, and he was showing me his house, which I have to say is bigger than any house in London I've ever been to, and he's a junior doctor. And I did sort of think, perhaps I should take your move and emigrate.
Well, there's a lot of Australia. Newcastle. Oh, sorry.
As that's left outside the off stump by Burns. No, go on, Messi.
Newcastle is as far from Perth as Cairo is from London. And sort of just to give you a sense of scale. Yes.
Bloody hell. I thought that though, because he was talking about driving up to Perth for the Afghanistan test, but I thought that might take about 5 days. But I think he's quite up for it. He wants to do a bit of camping.
Well, the Afghanistan test is going to be in Tasmania in Hobart.
You don't want to pick up your friends you haven't seen for a long time on minor details, but I did think that it was in Hobart. But he was very insistent. And anyway, Jameson's going to come in to complete his over. He bowls to Burns. That's left outside the off stump. And there is no run. So certainly Rory Burns doesn't appear to think the chase is on. That's the end of the over. 13 for none. Burns is on 9. Sibley's on 4.
So there's a few tweets to catch up on. Jay Grover says Bruce French will climb and claim the Matterhorn at the drop of a penny. Brian Barish says listen to Sean Nestless Tracy, Gary the 143rd Beatle nailer, and Ian Who Fourth. So named because this is the first time I've heard Ian on GC. Tier 5 Philo says harsh on NASA, good to see a spinning all-rounder following on from a fast bowling all-rounder in Cook. El Dropadas says how madly good this Jamison will be if he really bends his back. Just seems to amble in and rolls his arm over and unleash his fucking unplayables. He's not bad, is he?
Well, I think we know that speed is not the only thing that's important in cricket. As Southey's in to Sibley, and that's left outside the off stump, and there's no run. There's 60 overs left today, from what I've seen on the board, and it doesn't look to me, Gary or Messi, that England are going for it. Would that be fair to say?
They're going to bat for an hour and have a look, and then maybe bat for another hour and then have a look. But I didn't expect them to say wag away here, and they're not say wagging away.
They're not really say-wag style players, are they? It's not.
Well,
it's not their natural games. Quite right. 66 overs, Knackle tells me. Thank you very much. So still ample time as Southey is in over the wickets to Sibley, and he's defending, and that's a well-judged single out to the man at mid-off, and they've gone through for it. So Burns will be on strike for the next delivery. Sibley's moved on to 5.
Well, I was very pleased to find my favourite sandwich shop had survived the pandemic, because I was in Gray's Inn Road, just around the corner from Gray's Inn, of course, and Charlick's, a sandwich shop I've been frequenting for 35 years or so, is still working, but there weren't very many lawyers in there. Usually you've got to sort of clamber over barristers and juniors and article clerks, although they're not called that anymore, I don't think, in order to fight your way to the front and have the focaccia, mozzarella and tomato sandwich, which is highly recommended. But these are the businesses that rely on work from office rather than work from home. I was very pleased that they were still there.
As Burns defending, as Southey's going around the wicket to him, and that's pushed down to the offside for no run. You're always talking about Charlick's, Gary. I really like a sandwich shop which I'm not sure of its name in Temple. It's opposite what used to be Burley's. I think it's called Bewley's or something. And it's interesting how you can develop these haunts where it's the only place I buy sandwiches. But I must try this, Charlick's. What's your go-to order?
Mozzarella, tomato, and basil on their own focaccia. Their egg mayo on rye is also excellent.
As Southey is bowling a wide delivery that Burns leaves outside the off stump. There's no run. And it's on Gray's Inn Road. Well, as you know, that's near where I work, so I might have to go and make sure they get through the remainder of the pandemic, as it were.
Yes, it's opposite the Condor Cycles there, so you'll find it. And I recommend it highly. The Temple is one of the best places.
Ed, you're definitely way too young to be stuck in a sandwich rut for the rest of your life.
But the Temple is one of the very best places to sit down and enjoy a lunchtime sandwich in London. A real oasis of calm amongst the hurly-burly.
It's left outside the off stump by Rory Burns. Tim Southey bowling a full delivery, trying to tempt him into smashing one into the hands of the slip cordon, but he won't. He will resist that urge, and he's just left it outside the off stump. We're being criticised by Knackle for our sort of London-centric focus. Unlike him, I'm not in the media, so I don't need to play to suggestions of London-centric bias. I can just talk about I can talk about my favourite sandwich shop if I want, or he can mute me. I mean,
and you may have noticed that I'm speaking in an accent.
Southey's into Burns. That's driven beautifully, but it's gone straight to the man fielding at point, and there is no run. A lovely shot, but that's gone straight to the fielder. Rory Burns
white-haired whinger from Liverpool.
Yes, indeed. Okay, there's a few tweets to catch up on.
Sorry, Messi. Go, knock yourself out.
Some of which don't make much sense to me because I'm new in the spot, as it were. Jeff Perkins says Knackle is promoting Collingwood. And Jay Grover says, my last word, in quotes, lies. Why do you lie? El Shrufferner says the cameraman is trying really hard to find someone who is funnier than the Raincoat Man, which was quite a feat, actually. And Jay Grover says in capitals, that wasn't Gary's last word, literally. 3 seconds later, fuck's sake. You never have a last word. Last word, Gary. Ravi says that the 8 openers has scored more than 3,000 runs. Sorry.
It's all right. Jameson's just bowled his first ball that's defended into the onside, and there's no run.
He says that the 8 openers has scored more than 3,000 runs between 1989 and 2001. The lowest average of 39.4 is Mike Atherton, just for Gary Naylor to add to his defence of Atherton.
He was all defence, wasn't he, Gary, from what I remember?
I saw him score 100 in a one day playing for Lancashire. So he could punch the ball through point quite often, but no, he was an old school correct batsman, was Atherton.
Sibley's leaving. Jameson's second delivery outside the off stump, and there's no run. To go back to our relatable reference, which I'm sure our viewers and listeners are enjoying, Gary, you're absolutely right. The Fountain by Fountain Court in Temple, it's probably the nicest place in London, I would say, to have a sandwich.
The lawyers are very keen to keep them out of the guidebooks and off the tourist walks. So if you're in the know, it's a lovely place to go.
And exactly right. Lawyers like myself would like to pretend it's private property, but it isn't. You're allowed to go there and have your sandwich like anybody else. As Jameson is in, and Sibley's again leaving outside the off stump, and there's no run.
Josie Oak has taken some offence at Nestler's comment about queues at the airport being a super spreader event. He tells him what he can do with himself. I'm a UK citizen and entitled to enter my home country. I've had a PCR test and had to quarantine for 11 nights in some shit hotel with 2 more tests. Stricter and more ridiculous than any other country. There you go, Nestlers.
Well, not more ridiculous.
I'm sure it wasn't meant personally at you, Josie Oak.
Well, as Jameson is coming in again over the wicket to Sibley, and that's on the stump, so defended quite correctly. Back to the man fielding at mid-on, and there's no run. Well, certainly not message as more strictly than your country, which basically his view is, I think if they could build a wall and a globe over the country to not let anybody in at all, they wouldn't let them in. I mean, there was some controversy, wasn't there, about whether the Australian cricketers from the IPL would be allowed back into the country, and they're Australian citizens.
They weren't for a fortnight. There's still 40,000 Australians waiting to get home. Because there's a limit on how many can be taken through hotel quarantine.
Jameson is over the wicket to Sibley, and that's a little bit of extra bounce there from Jameson, but it's left quite alone by Sibley. It was wide outside the off stump, and it's gone through to Watling for no run.
Ed, I've just noticed that you're wearing a halo here, like you're a kind of medieval saint or something. I'm very impressed with that. Is that something you have have done deliberately? Are you expecting to be beatified and later sanctified during this season, or what? I'm very pleased with it, though.
You'd have to ask him in capital letters, Gary. God works in mysterious ways.
Touché, mon frère.
Jameson's into Sibley, and that's almost fiddles at it, but quite correctly leaves it alone outside the off stump. There's no run. No, it is a slightly odd light I've got. I don't know if you can see. It's unfortunately I have none of the effects or the sort of adulation of the people that I want. So I think the easiest way to do is try and rig your lighting so that when you're in court, people think you might be someone that they might meet when they're at the pearly gates of St. Peter. That's my view. That's my view.
Quite right too.
If you, sorry, Messi, go ahead. End of the over, 14 for none.
Eden Ottignon says, do English TV presenters have a word limit? You can almost go an over without a word said. Indeed, I can leave the sound on with you geezers and the TV on and not have any brain aneurysm from too many conversations. I've got to say that's quite refreshing on TV. When you watch the IPL on TV, it's hell. It really is hell. So if they don't need to say anything, if there's nothing to be added to the picture.
That's quite right. Well, we've got a new bowler, and it's a man whose haircut says a lot. And his first ball's knocked into the leg side. They're going to come through for 2, I reckon. Yes, they're going to scamper back. Oh no, almost a run-out chance. They sort of will they, won't they? And they're going to go upstairs for it, and we'll hear the jingle while we go upstairs. I think he was in.
Have become Colinda Grandall.
Oh, it's a bit closer than I thought. BJ Watling has he taken the stumps off? No, Dom Sibley is home. Good dive. Probably wasn't too there. It was just nurdled into the leg side, and it was fielded very well at mid-wicket, and they quite correctly decided not to go for a second, and Dom Sibley dived full length to get back in. He's made rather a mess of his jumper. But it's been signalled not out on the field, and it's 15 for none. Then Sibley has moved on to 5.
Just underlining slow going, Kyle Jameson has bowled 5 consecutive maidens. I would suggest some of those maidens are a bit of what Rob Smythe used to refer to as Mullally maidens, in that the ball could be left alone with impunity. And I wouldn't say that Jameson wasted the new ball, but it could have been more threatening. And I think at least partly in response to that, and I know he came on as first change in the first innings, Colin de Grandhomme has come on, I think, to try to entice England into playing a few more shots and trying to get that wicket column turning for the New Zealanders. Because maidens don't really matter in this instance. It's about taking wickets for New Zealand.
As de Grandhomme is in, and that's defended, the perfect line in length outside the off stump, and there is no run. I think you're right, Gary. I mean, Kyle Jameson bowled in the last over. We saw some pretty wide, short deliveries that Sibley and Burns were just able to leave alone. And this is New Zealand's game, as it were. They need to get their wickets. England will be quite happy, I think, to walk away with this with the draw. And you need a bit more accuracy, probably, as de Grandhomme is in, and that is driven straight to the man fielding a short cover, and there's no run. You need a bit more accuracy, probably, to try and tempt the England batsman to play.
Yeah, just looking at the replay of the run out there, it wasn't the greatest throw from Devon Conway, because BJ Watling had to come in front of the stumps to catch it and then go quite a long way back to hit the stumps. In relative terms, when you're on a tight run out, had Conway thrown the ball a little harder, it would have been a bit more dangerous.
Wide outside the off stump from Colin de Grandhomme, a Jameson-like delivery that goes straight into the hand of Watling unmolested. Sorry, Gary.
Yeah, I think that these are often the fine margins that matches can turn on, and Conway needed to get that over the stumps to Watling. It wasn't a distant throw, it was only a 3/4 length throw, and he should have done better there, I think.
Grandhomme's in, and that's left outside the off stump by Sibley, and there's no run. But I think we must, and I'm sure people have already, but be encouraged by New Zealand's declaration. I'm not sure it's one that an English captain would have made, but it's made this last day, which could have petered out, much more interesting than it would otherwise have been.
Indeed.
It's certainly brought the game alive, hasn't it? It could easily have just faded away, and now it might fade away, but it'll fade away much later.
So that's a good line and length by de Grandhomme outside the off stump, and Sibley thought about playing but let it waft into the hands of BJ Watling, and that's the end of the over. 15 for none. Burns is on 10. He'll be on strike for the next over. Sibley's on 5.
So I'm going to be skipping a few tweets, I'm afraid, just to keep current. But Jeff Perkins says if England was serious about chasing, they could have reversed the batting order and had the tails say wagging the dog.
Oh,
Nice one, Jeff. El Chopinaz says every now and then there's Slothorpe on TV, and he looks like he still regrets the decision to go to New South Wales before the Ashes of 2005. Such a hero. Leah says there is a chase on you, Muppets. Start throwing your bats around. That's Root screaming from the balcony, possibly. I have to say I disagree with you very strongly in relation to the declaration, Gary. It may be an England versus Australia thing. I thought it was an excellent declaration.
Jamieson's bowled an absolutely massive wide one that has gone past BJ Watling, no fault of his, and it's gone to the boundary for one of these.
1, 2, 3, 4. The ball went through to the keeper.
Hardly threw past the keeper by about 2 metres.
I mean, it almost went. It was almost like that Harmison wide. It almost went into the hands of first slip. Sorry, Messi. After this ball, I would like to hear your views on the declaration, because I thought it was a very good declaration, I must say. But they're trying to find the ball back, and Carl Jamieson might be trying to work out where he's going to aim it, because it shouldn't be there. It shouldn't be there. Right, Jamieson over the wicket to the left-handed Rory Burns. He bowls. That's a much straighter ball that is nudged on the bounce to the man at gully, and there's no run. Sorry, Messi.
Yeah, I was of the view that it's a declaration that actually gave New Zealand a chance to win. If they'd made another 40 runs, the match would effectively have been dead, and England, while they have the capacity to collapse, would have been an awful lot safer. As it turns out, it looks like I think it'll probably be a draw anyhow. But I don't think it was a particularly courageous declaration. I thought it was a good declaration myself.
Well, England once declared at 551 for 6 when I wanted them to go on and get at least another 50. I was right, they were wrong.
But that's the risk.
So you lose, Messi. That's it. You've lost. Jameson changes his line to the wicket. Live attack to round the wicket, and it's left alone by Rory Burns. There's no run.
That's going to be on your
Gary.
Well,
that's going to be on your tombstone, Gary.
Well,
I was right. I told you I was going to die.
Well, I was definitely wrong with the West Indies chase when Shai Hope played so sensationally and Craig Brathwaite at the other end, I think, got 90 yards. And I was definitely wrong with that. But there is evidence that the Guardian's over-by-over coverage when England declared on 551 for 6 of me being apoplectic at Flintoff's decision.
So, that was at Adelaide, was it? As Jameson bowls, and that's left by Rory Burns outside the off stump, and there's no run.
Well, the thing here is that the result doesn't necessarily prove you right or wrong.
No, it doesn't. But what was proved right at that time was when England declared on 551 for 6, they let Australia back into a match that they were out of. And the same is so here. Now, at Adelaide, I think England were 1-0 down after the first match, but could have gone, I think, to Perth 1-0 down and still in the series. 2-0 down, the damn thing was gone. So there's parallels here.
As Jameson bowls on the stumps, and that's, I think, inside edge onto the pad. There was a half-hearted appeal from Jameson, but there's no real appeal from behind the stumps, and there is no run. Gary, you wanted some legal Latin, and I don't use it, but I think I can here. That is a classic example, what you're describing, isn't it, of the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy.
I think it is, and I very much appreciate your obiter dicta on.
Katie Walker would be so proud of you.
It wasn't post hoc because contemporary. My comment is there in the Guardian's over coverage. The parallel is that England were out of this match, and New Zealand have opened the door for England to get back in. It looks like they're unlikely to take it, but still.
As Burns flicks one on the pads from Carl Jameson down to the man fielding at fine leg, and there is a single. I have to say, I'm not sure I agree with you there, Gary, but I do agree with you. Their bowling has been a bit wayward. As we see the end of the over, it's 20 for none.
Yes. I mean, when you consider that that Adelaide match, there were 550, so scoring runs wasn't a hard thing to do in Adelaide. Here, scoring runs has been a battle all the time, with very occasional breaks. Anyhow, I'm denying tweeters a chance. Leah says, does Donna count as a sandwich? If so, the correct choice is Lamm mit alles und Schaf. 2 points for Ed from Jay Grover. 1, luckily I've not been in any legal trouble recently, so your neglect of your client hasn't had any repercussions. And 2, you still owe me a duel.
I would refute both of those points. He's not my client, and I'm not dueling him. Anyway, to Grandhomme, into Burns. Nicked through the slips cordon by Rory Burns. He was somewhat in control of that, but not totally. And it's going to race to the boundary and hit it for one of these.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, God.
Could we call the boundary, by the way, because it's a sponsored boundary obstacle. Is it the Liverpool Victoria Sponge?
Very good, Gary.
Nicely done, nicely done.
There was a good chase on there by the field there to try and haul it in, but he didn't quite get there, and it has now been confirmed as a boundary, although I think, to be honest, it was one of those ones which probably ought to have been considered live. Tim Southey chased it down to the boundary, and he did his best, but it raced there. And I think that's a sort of... It was a controlled nick, as it were. Soft hands played by Rory Burns. I think we can give him the credit for that one. There's 2 slips and a gully in for Burns now as de Grandhomme bowls over the wicket, and that is defended out to the man at gully, and there is no run.
I have to say, Gary, that while the thought of Victoria Sponge appeals, the thought of Liverpool Victoria Sponge is far less appealing for some strange reason.
Yes, it might have a kind of chisel in the middle of it, or a file, or something like that. One feels indeed. There's been some adverts during Sky's coverage for a Sky documentary series known as Liverpool Narcos, which
de Grandhomme bowls, which is defended by Burns off the front foot for no run.
Which I'm slightly scared, maybe a little too close to home in lots of ways. But Liverpool Narcos, that's what Sky are promoting during the Test cricket. I'm not sure where the Venn diagram of fans of Test cricket and fans of Liverpool Narcos intersects, but evidently the marketing teams have decided that that's the best slot for it, along with the erectile dysfunction stuff.
Burns is leaving outside the off stump, a good length ball from de Grandhomme that goes harmlessly through to BJ Watling. Well, I think we've all seen at those T20 games in the box, there's a lot of young City types, perhaps, there's a crossover there, Gary, I don't know.
There was, in the early days of T20 when it started, I think 2003, there were taxis disgorging City types at the Oval Tube Station to go to the T20 matches.
As Burns defends, a good length ball from de Grandhomme out to the offside, and there's no run.
And I know because I was cycling behind them and had to avoid them running across the road as I was making my way home to Tooting from Elephant and Castle, and they were making their way in for the T20.
Yes, it is certainly an experience, some of those T20 blast games, and it remains to be seen whether that's going to maintain itself as de Grandhomme is into Burns. That's left outside the off stump, there's no run. In the sort of aftermath of the 100, because I know they wanted to attract a new fan base, the 100, but you do sort of think, well, won't those people just move into this new competition, which is so radically different? And listeners should hear my quote marks that I'm doing on the screen. So radically different from T20, but that remains to be seen.
Well, they don't actually watch the cricket, so
that's the weird thing about it.
24 for none, end of the over.
Earl Schopenhauer says Joe Root should have returned the declaration gesture by offering Bracey as a sacrificial opener. It isn't a gentleman's game anymore, I tell you. And Leah has one for you, Gary, saying one day even Gary will have the last word, because that's how mortality works.
It is.
Jamieson's continuing. That's off the inside half of the bat, going down to fine leg for a single. Yeah, I think if there's anyone I know, Gary, you will have the last word.
Wasn't it Spike Milligan on his gravestone? He has something like, I told you I was ill.
Yeah, well, interestingly, the church, so I'm a big fan of Spike Milligan, interestingly, the church wouldn't let him have it in English, so it's actually in Gaelic. I told you I was ill. Yeah. So in English it says, I think it's like light, life, and peace or something, and then in Gaelic underneath, I told you I was ill.
Super.
we talked about famous last words. You were reminding me of the story of the historian Robert Conquest, who wrote a famous book about the gulags and what had happened there. And as Jameson is over the wicket, don't let the cricket get in the way of the story. As driven by Burns into the offside, they're going to run through, I think, for a single. Yes, and he wrote a famous book about the gulags. I think it was in the 50s and the 60s. Stalin's pogroms, and it was fiercely contested by people on the left in the UK. And then, of course, it came out in the 80s and 90s that it was all true. He reissued the book, and his publishers said to him, "Would you like to have another subtitle?" And he said, "Yeah, that's a good idea." And they said to him, "What would it like to be?" And he said, "I think I should put at the end of it, I told you, you fucking fools."
Was it George III who on his deathbed was told that he could go? I'll break up for a moment.
Jameson's over the wicket, and that's a wide ball, as he's been so often in this innings so far, left by Sibley, no run.
That his health would improve if he were to take the air at the seaside and return to underline the Regis in the town's name, Bognor Regis, to which he looked up and said, "Bugger, Bognor."
Yes.
That's very good.
Expired.
That's very good.
Yes, I'm sure all these are apocryphal, but perhaps tweet us if you've got some amusing last words while Burns and Sibley continue to block. Then,
but not if they're yours. We don't want you to die while you're listening to us.
Yes, please don't.
As Jameson's bowling to Sibley, and that's flicked. It's short, and it's flicked into the onside. Will the man at fine leg come round to field it? Yes, he will. It's Tim Southey down there, I think, and they'll run through for 2.
I think most of our last words will be something along the lines of, "So, it's Anderson with the new ball." That'll be ours.
I think yours and mine, Gary, might be, "and another thing."
Oh, I tell you, it's bad when you're on guerrilla cricket and getting told off for being parochial, I tell you.
Not before time.
Commentary service.
Pseudo Gulti has given us a tip for Doner Kebab in Munich at Osbahnhof. He says they're the best in the whole of Germany. There you go.
As Sibley's defending off the front foot, that's gone out to gully. Burst out of Tim Southey's. No, it's not Tim Southey there. That is. I'm not quite sure who it is, but it has burst out of his hands. They get through for a single. Sorry, Messi, we interrupted your tweets. Please get through them.
I just want to suggest that if you don't fancy the kebab, which is the best in Germany, you can at least have the Wurst.
Oh, God.
Holy moly, Gary.
Gary, coming to a very poor comedy store near you soon. Dear.
Let's get through all the tweets because I imagine we're a little bit behind, and that's my fault. No one else is, as Jameson bowls a bouncer to Burns that he leaves and ducks underneath and goes straight through to Watling.
Speed tweet reading. Jeff Perkins says, "Typical, just like the sandwich shop, the bloody lawyers would like to keep the afterlife just for themselves as well." Chopin said, "The front of Sibley's old school cable knit sleeveless sweater is dirty, and this is what makes Test cricket great." And he also says Jamison is doing a Harmison here, the Great Wide. Yeah, it's not far off. Joe Grover says, "Oh, for heaven's sake, I live in the dead centre of the 5th largest city in the country. Why are children whooping like E-numbered banshees around my courtyard?" It's hell, isn't it, Jay? Connor McNally says, "What would you want of the CricViz win predictor?" But it says, "Make what you want of it." But it says the...
Sorry, Messi, to cut you off, but de Grandhomme just induces a slightly full shot from Dominic Sibley, who, not sure if he wants to play it, then decides he will, and he taps it onto the ground almost Kane Williamson-esque, and it bounced through to the keeper, no run. Sorry, Messi.
The cricket keeps getting in the way. We did our best work when the rain was on. It says, "Make what you want of WinViz," but it's showing New Zealand declaration moved their win expectancy from 19 to 27%, and England's from 1 to 5.
As Sibley is forward, defending a Colin de Grandhomme delivery back to the bowler. So that suggests it was a good move then, I think.
Yes.
I'm not great with stats.
Yeah. Mind you, WinViz is WinViz.
WinViz is WinViz, says Jeremy. Quite so. De Grandhomme bowls. That's wide outside the off stump. Sibley drives, but that's gone to the man fielding at short cover, and there's no run.
An England captain once made a declaration. A declaration at Lords that people felt was a little generous. And Gordon Greenwich climbed in, made a double 100, and West Indies got over the line with about 45 minutes to spare, didn't they?
It's funny, isn't it?
1984.
Everybody remembers the declaration where it's chased down. Very few remember the declaration where it works, which is most of the time.
As de Grandhomme beats Sibley outside the off stump, and that goes through to Watling, and there's no run.
Farong says de Grandhomme doesn't quite have the nose of Lenny Pascoe. Apart from that, he could nearly be passed off as a relative.
Oh, Lenny Pascoe. What was Lenny's real name? Was Lenny Dertanovich? Was that his birth name? They changed it to Pascoe. Not sure.
As de Grandhomme's in, and that's driven by Sibley out to mid-on, and there's no run.
He was one of those fast bowlers who ran through the crease, didn't he? He had no discernible, from memory, he had very little in the way of a discernible delivery stride or jump. He just sort of was running very, very quickly, and in the middle of this running, the arm came over and the ball was delivered, and then he ran through with a big follow-through as well. Exciting bowler to watch, but seemed to burn brightly for a short time.
Yeah.
And it's a final dot ball to complete de Grandhomme's over. It's 29 for none.
Warren says Tony's wildlife entourage is Noah-esque. Chopina says a member of New Zealand sports staff went down on one knee in front of Jamison, and I'm not quite sure what to think about it. Does he have a ring though? Wiggy says, as nice and interesting as you are to listen to, can you tell us what the score is from time to time, please? That may be my fault. I jump in a little too quickly. I'm sorry about that, Wiggy.
No, it's my fault.
For no wicket.
It's my fault, Jeremy, and I must apologise. I had the sort of display for our remote Zoom call over the over part of the Sky scoreboard, so I wasn't always sure it's over, but it's been pointed out, and I apologise. And it's 29 for none. Yeah. And now, Messi, as it's 29 for none, tell us what the tweets are at 2:34 at 29 for none.
Jay Grover again. Ed, I have you on record choosing weapons. Let's sort it before I die. The curtains must go, or I will. I'm guessing Naylor is a fan of the US filibuster.
We're having a bowling change, and the new bowler will be jingled up imminently, but he's bowling round the wicket to Burns. That's gone through to the leg side, down the leg side, through to BJ Watling. Burns played at it, but he missed at it, and there's no run.
I'm guessing we're due for a change quite shortly too.
To fly with Tim Southey to tonight. I probably won't fly with Tim Southey. And again, I just might.
Yes, I think in 5 minutes, so it's 22-3. You'll have heard the last of me if you want them to score more often, as that's down the leg side by Southey as well, and Burns has flicked that quite beautifully down to fine leg, and it's clattered into the boundary despite the despairing dive of the fielder down there for one of these.
The number of the day. Who could ask for more? The number of the day is 4.
Oh dear, Tim Southey looks like a bowler who's got through a lot of work in the last 24 hours or so with those first 2 deliveries of this spell.
That one bent like a banana though, Gary. I mean, you can see why they thought that they could possibly bowl England out today, but their lines just have not quite been right, the 2 New Zealand opening bowlers.
Yeah.
Anyway, Southey trying to continue to Burns. That's outside the off stump. It doesn't swing. It doesn't really go through to the keeper at all. On the bounce, BJ Watling collects it as it's left by Burns, and there's no run.
Leah says Churchill's last words were apparently, "I'm bored with it all."
My favourite last words was, I can't remember who it was, but apparently their last words were, and this may not mean anything to you, Jeremy, but were simply, Channel 5. It's all sports and shagging, isn't it? And then they died. Which, if you watch Channel 5, is pretty accurate. Anyway, Tim Southey round the wicket to Rory Burns, left outside the off stump by Burns, and there's no run.
I've known one or
I
two
would
people.
imagine it has great ratings then,
Yeah.
if that's the case.
I've known one or two people in my time whose last words, first words, and middle words were pretty much that, because it was describing how they spent their time before shuffling off this mortal coil. Yes. But the George Best thing about 90% of his money spending on booze and women, the other 10% he wasted. There's an element of that in those last words.
Tim Southey into Rory Burns, and he bowls outside the off stump. That's a better line, about the 5th stump line, and Burns quite correctly judges it's going to go over the stumps, past them, lets it through to BJ Watling. There's no run. It's a tricky one, I suppose, because you don't know whether your last words are your last words, do you? That's for others to judge. Well, not judge, I suppose, record.
It's not a question of judgment.
No, it's not. It's not. You're right.
If those words are we in Switzerland now? I think you could be pretty sure they are going to be your last words.
The last ball of the first over of Tim Southey's new spell, he bowls, and that is an in-swinger, and Rory Burns plays it quite correctly down to mid-on. England are 33 for none, not going for this chase, it seems. Burns on 20, Sibley's on 9. Messages.
Apropos getting down on your knee, Amal Sadakaran says a broken Angelo Matthews did it at Sanger, wasn't on one knee but on both knees, and asked him not to retire. John Perry, not so much last words, but it is said that Bramwell Bronte, brother of the famous Liffey sisters, died standing up simply to prove that he could be done. He propped himself up on the mantelpiece at the crucial moment. What a tosser.
He was a sickly child, was Bramwell.
Eddie X says, surely modern science needs to find a way to preserve Gary beyond the mere human lifespan.
De Grandhomme is in for the first ball of his new over, and that's defended by Sibley into the offside for no run.
Oh, don't. I've got a doctor's appointment tomorrow morning, and they're going to read numbers to me and make all kinds of statements about this and that, all of which I know, all of which I understand, few of which I'll be able to do, but there you go.
He wants Amazon to get you to replace Alexa.
De Grandhomme's in, and that's left outside the off stump by Sibley, and there's no run. So you're expecting what we might call repeated advice, Gary, by your doctor?
Repeated advice and a change in the drug regime. I think that's coming. But let's see. My hopes aren't high. Put it that way.
I'm glad you meant by drug regime what they're giving you rather than just your hardcore consumption of drugs.
I am.
Polls, and that's defended by Sibley off the back foot for no run.
I do have a drug supplier in Tooting, but he is actually Lord's Pharmacy rather than a less legitimate form of business.
Yes. On an unrelated one, I haven't seen the bear for ages. I hope he's all right. Anyway.
Very good, Ed.
Anyway, 33 for none. I think we'll be coming to the one more over, I'm being told by Knackle, as that's driven beautifully by Sibley, but unfortunately there's lots of men in the inside ring in the offside region, and there's no run. I don't know if Knackle wants us to do one more over after this, or just one more this over. I'm sure he'll tell us as he sits in the...
I think it's the end of this over.
End of this over. Thank you, Knackle. I'm sorry, it's my poor reading, not your unclear explanations. As we have had a sort of soporific 40 minutes, I think it'd be fair to say, Gary, as de Grandhomme is bowling, and that's left by Sibley outside the off stump, and there's no run. Sibley's got 9 off 49 balls, Burns has got 20 off 52. No indication that England are going to try and make a game of it, but that's not what they're required to do. The match situation dictates that they're going to try and bat out the day, I think.
Yeah, the most tempting declaration since the Second World War has proved to be less than tempting.
Yes, they haven't fallen for it, but I have to say, New Zealand haven't made them play a huge amount. Well, de Grandhomme has, as that's bowled, and that's hit on the pads. A half-hearted appeal from de Grandhomme, but a little bit too high, I think. They might review this just because they have 3 reviews and they've only 60 overs left, but didn't look out to me, I have to say. Knackles motioning that it's going down leg. I thought it was a bit high as well.
Yeah, there's not a lot going for that one, and Kane agrees with.
And they agree. So, in any event, that is the end of the over. It's 33 for none. Burns will be on strike for the next over. He's on 20. Sibley's on 9. And you're going to have someone who's going to tell the score much more repeatedly than me coming on now. Yes.
See you later.
Well, it doesn't
See you later, guys.
Doesn't appear to be changing very much. To be fair, Rory Burns is at 29 out of 52 balls, 4 very nice fours. Dominic Sibley needing 4 and over is 9 off 50. But you can imagine, though, Nestlers and Forthy, you can imagine the criticism if England had tried to go at this and then lost a flurry of wickets. Not that fear of criticism is a very good decision-making basis, but there's the slight air that England can't really, they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't.
Well, they'd be damned. Wouldn't be damned if they got the runs, but I just don't think they're. Unfortunately, that's the third least likely of the scenarios. I think they worked that out for themselves and said, "Well, okay, we'll review where we are somewhere around tea time if we feel we can have a dash at it." But there's no Stokes, there's no Butler. Who's going to get into fifth gear? I mean, one or two of them could, but they looked so shaky in the first innings.
Well, I mean, some of them weren't out there long enough. I think Sibley actually looked quite good in the first innings until he got a very good ball. Crawley and Lawrence weren't out there long enough for anyone to work out whether they were shaky. Root batted nicely enough. Ollie Pope played a few nice shots. Bracey is quite a solid operator rather than a attacking one. And then you've got Ollie Robinson, who's again a solid Doughty number 8 or 9. Stuart Broad and Mark Wood, who knows, and then James reverse sweep Anderson. If they are none down at tea and need 4 and a bit and over, they might go for it for 15 overs or so, 20 overs or so. If they lose a few wickets, they can claw back in. But New Zealand needed to, quite apart from the runs, they needed to give themselves time to bowl England out. England are 33 for none. New Zealand declared after the lunch break was brought forward at 169 for 6, setting England 273 runs to win in 75 overs. New Zealand really have been bowling quite wide of off stump for most of this innings, particularly Kyle Jamieson in his impressive looking on paper spell from the nursery end of 7 overs, 5 mains, none for 6. But really there should have been an extra 5 on there because there were 4 byes given that probably should have been 5 wides, and much of the rest was unthreatening. Tim Southey is none for 18 of his 6 and has caused a few more problems, and Colin de Big Hair is at 4 none for 5 of 4 overs and has dibbled the ball around a little bit. We're seeing this LBW yelp really rather than appeal that was quite clearly going over the top of the stumps. I'm Knuckle Mpande here on Guerrilla Cricket for the next half an hour. With me are Ian Forth and Sean Nestle boy Tracy. I don't really care why New Zealand declared. I'm happy that they did.
I think it's made for me, it's more of an interesting game.
Well, it's made a game of what could have been a completely moribund affair otherwise.
Exactly, and sport is entertainment. I'm not sure they thought that was part of their thought process, but it is.
It's an odd combination to lay down the gauntlet, set an aggressive declaration, and then not try and get the other side out. Yeah. Why are they bowling dry?
I don't know that Jameson was actually doing it on purpose. I think he was. He was trying to throw to certainly to Burns at least to hang the ball outside off stump and see if he had a drive at it. I don't think it made a lot of sense to Dom Sibley, who doesn't tend to chase anything outside off stump. You can say, there are a lot of people who are critical of Dom Sibley, but there's one thing he is, and that's patient. Tim Southey is going to continue, having switched to the nursery end. 2 slips in the gully. 3 men in a vertical line, really, with a backward point, extra cover, and mid-off as he's in to Rory Burns. 2 leg side, he hits the pad, but it's clearly going down leg, and they'll saunter through for a leg by as BJ Watling has to chase this out to square leg with no fielders within 20 yards of where he intercepted the ball. Michael Goff punches his own thigh to signal the leg by, and they come through for it. England 34 for none. At the start of this over, they needed 240 runs off 58 overs to win, which is 4.14 and over, which is about what New Zealand scored in the first session. They scored 107 runs in the 25 overs we had before the rain forced an early lunch, so good proactivity. I've enjoyed the way New Zealand have gone about their work today. Southey in to Dominic Sibley on 9 not out of 50 balls. Full delivery, tries to drive. I think that started life as an off drive, but reached the end of its natural cycle as a squirty push through mid-wicket. But he'll take a single.
It's worth pointing out, though, that New Zealand's top order averages 42, 200, 54, 45, 43, 38, 37. England's averages 30, 30, 34, 49, 31, 27. Does not yet have an average, so there's the difference.
Sure. Well, I think Bracey actually will have an average. He has an average of 0.
Oh, he does. Yes, he's now achieved an average.
Different conditions, but fair point. Southey in, hints of movement and wobble outside Rory Burns' off stump, but it dives through to BJ Watling, who's had to take a couple above his head and a couple down by his ankles. So if they can get a little bit of uneven bounce from straight, it might be quite interesting. I'm sure Neil Wagner will exploit that, as might this man, Mitchell Santner, who's warming up. Did get a little bit of turn in the first innings and might trouble Rory Burns in particular with that rough outside the left-handers off stump. Should have had him on 80-odd yesterday in Burns' excellent 100, and BJ Watling, the usually faultless BJ Watling, missed a stumping. In comes Southey, right arm round the wicket, past umpire goes wide on the crease, hoops this back into Rory Burns. What a delivery that was from back of a length as well, roaring and rearing and spitting up at Rory Burns. He does well to fend it off into the offside. Not wholly sure he knew where it was going, but he did well to drop the hand. So very good delivery from Southey. There is no run.
Yeah, that's interesting delivery, wasn't it?
Pitched the same
just
place.
Listening to,
pitched the same
just
place as the
listening
one
to
that rolled through to the keeper a few balls before. So there's plenty happening on this day 4 and a bit.
There is. Another reason why they're probably not going for it. Just hearing Nasser on commentary yesterday saying that the greater drainage that they have these days is a two-edged sword. Yes, you can play after half an hour, even if it's been raining solidly, but the pitch goes very dry and very crumbly very easily, so you get odd. You don't get firm bounce unless it's Old Trafford and perhaps the Ageas Bowl.
No, I mean Lawrence's pitch has been fairly dry and flattish, although it is a ground where swing bowlers can have fun. We certainly saw the World Cup final pitch last year where Colin de Grandon bowled so well. Was very slow. Rory Burns got hit quite hard on the hand by that delivery from Southey, so the England physios and doctors are out there just to give it a rub better and see what's up. He's holding his finger. Jack Leach has come out there. I'm not really sure what Jack Leach's purpose is out there in a medical emergency, but he's out there being a good lad.
Shall I get through some messages?
Just to say, the England physio is holding the finger where Tim Southey hit him and saying, "Does that hurt?" And Rory Burns is saying, "Yes, it does."
Then don't do it. John Wilkinson on YouTube says, "Kia ora and a very good morning to you all. It was 1:20 from a very wet, stormy night here in Rotorua, New Zealand. Just jumped in on the Queen's birthday Monday here in New Zealand. Enjoying the banter between you blokes. This is fantastic. Great to have this to view as being a benefit. Sky is out, as is Spark Sport, along with MC, another Kiwi. We're getting a lot of love on the old YouTube from Kiwis." And it's quite extraordinary, isn't it, that they have a day off for the Queen's birthday, and in England you don't?
We do in Australia too.
And we don't?
I thought we did here.
On the Queen's birthday?
I thought we did here, or is it the official birthday? I forget.
No, it's not a bank holiday, is it?
I mean, no, it isn't. That's in.
No, not in England. It is in Australia.
We don't have a day off for St George's Day either.
The converts are always more zealous.
True. Neymar Butlin says apparently when General Franco was on his deathbed, a massive crowd gathered in the plaza outside his room saying, "Goodbye, Franco," and he said, "Where are they all going?" and then snuffed it.
Could I just go in for one moment with my favourite last words? Which I think it was Turgenev, the Russian novelist. I could be wrong. But I absolutely love this. They were talking about duels, the previous commentary team. And Turgenev's last words were, "I am not going to shoot at that fool." He died in a duel.
Oh dear. Warren says, "Why the hell are we seeing a side-by-side bowling comparison of Jameson and the small child over and over?" That must have been on the TV.
During the lunch break, and I think a little bit before play started as well, Sky have been doing this. They've been doing this thing for a little while where they get people sending clips, and I'm sure there was some technical point about bowling that Simon Dool, their resident New Zealand fast bowling expert, was talking them through. Burns is back in position now. We've got 2 slips and a gully. Slips quite wide actually, giving Watling plenty of time to fling himself at the ball. Backward point to cover mid off, mid on quite wide, quite closer to the back than usual. Mid wicket. In fact, no, there is no mid wicket. In fact, there's 2 men back on the leg side. That's nicely flicked by Burns. Times it nicely through the onside. Santner, in between warming up, does the fielding out there at deep square leg. Burns moves to 21, bringing Dominic Get Me Out If You Can Sibley on 10 not out of 51 balls. England 36 for none, chasing 273. 1 ball left of this 7th over of Southey, his second in this spell from the nursery end.
I guess it's a great opportunity for a young player to make a real name for himself, because one thing we do always remember is some heroic dash to the finishing line. Thorpe and Hick in the dark in Pakistan and so forth.
Thorpe and Hussain, I think, wasn't it? Last ball of the over from Southey is something. Well, it started life as a sort of magic ball outswinger, but it just kept on going down the leg side. Sibley tries to turn it past BJ Watling to find leg. It comes off his toe and goes for 4 leg byes. I cannot believe New Zealand are even thinking about reviewing this. Fairly sure that was going down leg. No, Kane Williamson's decided we've got 3 reviews left and we're trying to win the game. We'll review it.
That was out, that was out, that was definitely out. Was that definitely out? I don't know.
It did
Is it just me, or does Kane Williamson actually look like one of the sort of, is it dwarfs in the Hobbit movie?
He's very beardy. He's got a very good facial covering from someone who looked about 12 when he first started playing international cricket. There's some good facial fur. He's some New Zealand, I think Jane Francis among others calls him the Weir pup. This ball has hit Dom Sibley outside leg stump.
It's missing by a mile, isn't it?
What a terrible review.
It did start to swing a little bit, but it's umpire's call on the outside of leg stump, and it's clearly missing. That was very much hit and hope from Kane Williamson, BJ Watling and Tim Southey. I think Watling was saying don't bother, but Southey's talked him into it, and they've lost their review. They have 2 left. End result, 4 leg byes.
We've been joined by John from a damp Black Forest in Germany. Rain stops play. Very big cricket stumps here, he says. Well, they would be in the Black Forest in Germany. Drafting a new anthem, Land of Pope and Crawley. I haven't got further than the first layer, says Mike. Very good, Mike. I think you should carry on drafting that. I'm loving Forthy's dog collar jumper, sort of Byzantine. I'm not sure any of my old cassocks could fit you, but I reckon you could pull it off. Jay has
thank you very much.
I think, by the way, Forthy, that I'm not so up on my Church of England, but I don't actually think being an atheist would be that big a bar to being a vicar in the modern Church of England, to be honest. We do have a change of bowling. We do have a change of bowling.
Might even be encouraged. I think the Bishop of Durham was an atheist at one stage, wasn't he?
Oh my word! Very nearly one of the worst wickets in Test cricket history of Mitchell Santner's first ball as he replaces Colin de Grandhomme at the pavilion end. A full toss. Rory Burns tried to turn it to leg. Leading edged it just past short mid wicket, and it bobbles short of mid on. Fairly inglorious, but we'll give Mitch Santner a jingle anyway.
Santner baby, get some drift into the pads.
He does get some drift into the pads. Ooh, Rory Burns didn't look particularly comfortable there as he tried to work it to leg, and it off the pads, I think, yes, dribbles down through the vacant leg slip region, and I think is quite happy to get off strike. The slow left armour, Mitchell Santner to the left-hander with a little bit of rough on a day 4 and a bit pitch, really. Might not be so easy. And on Dom Sibley's Test debut in New Zealand, he got rather tied down by Mitchell Santner on a pitch that was doing very little at Mount Maunganui. He has improved his scoring and strike rotation against spin since, but he's got Santner to work with. This is tossed up outside off stump. Sibley has a drive at it. Never looks that comfortable driving early-ish in his innings. This squirts off the outside part of the bat. Devon Conway does well to haul it in before it reaches the third man fence, and they come through for 3, well run by Sibley and Burns.
Do you remember that ball that Graham Swan bowled to Chris Rogers? It was the worst ball that he would have bowled all summer. Chris Rogers missed it with a terrible shot. It was going down leg side. The umpire gave it out, and he couldn't review it because Watson had already wasted all their review. It was like 4 awful mistakes in one ball.
Yep. It hit him on the box outside leg stump. I do remember that delivery. That 2013 Ashes was a very strange series. Burns has a big sweep of the type that he essayed off Neil Wagner yesterday. This one he misses and bounces off the body into the offside. Ross Taylor runs from slip to field. There is no run. There is a slip and a short leg in place. No leg slip, which actually probably might well happen if Burns keeps looking so awkward trying to play Santner. Taylor at first slip. Tom Latham under the lid at short leg. Santner in, Burns goes back and pushes this into the onside, fielded at short leg. There is no run.
remember Dominic Cork making a name for himself with a heroic dash to the finishing line when we still needed 40 runs with 2 wickets in hands in 2000 against the West Indies.
Santner in, bowling from mid-crease. Goes a little bit leg-sidey, and Burns is able to come forward to this and work it round the corner to Conway at long leg, and they come through for a single. Santner's first over is done, 4 runs off the bat, plus a leg by England, 45 for none. Need 228 of the next 56 overs to win what will be the most unlikely of victories, given the situation at the start of today, and indeed the start of yesterday.
Jeff Perkins wonders where you were questioning whether what Jack Leach was doing with the medical team. He said maybe the English physio is one of those old-fashioned ones that prescribes leeches for everything. Contentious tweet here from Madan Mohan Sharma says, very pathetic opening partnership is going on from the English batsmen. It appears they were batting for a draw from the word go. New Zealand tried their best to make the test interesting, but England have different thinking. Well, you know, it's down to New Zealand to get them out. I mean, that's the interest, isn't it? I mean,
Southey continuing an awful lot today already into his 8th over with not that much of a break between the 2 spells outside off stump to Burns, who pushes into the offside. There is no run. Quite a lot of the deliveries they had to face, particularly from Kyle Jamieson, were far too wide for them to be doing anything with. And not
one of the problems with...
Sorry, go ahead.
One of the problems with cricket generally is this moral imperative that creeps in. You ought to be doing this. That doesn't really exist nearly so much in most of the sports that we play. Ought England to be going for the runs? They don't have to according to the law.
Southey into Burns at full delivery, swinging into the left-hander, his stock delivery. The in-swinger to the left-hander, the out-swinger to the right-hander. Burns blocks up to mid-on. There is no run. You do see it in football a little bit. People get very moralistic about teams who play defensively or don't try and dominate possession and so forth. But England, I think England are 45 for none now, and they've been scoring slowly. But if they can get to T, and there's a fair way to go to T, none or 1 down, they've given themselves a chance to have a dart at it. As Southey is in. Oh, good delivery. That one comes in very sharply in the air and then rears off the pitch again into the top hand region of Rory Burns. He does well to get the bottom hand off the bat and steer the resultant glove down before it can carry to second slip, who dive forward. But Southey is getting the ball to talk from the nursery end. Again, right into that top hand, second time in 2 overs. It just bounced short of Latham at second slip. This is very, very good bowling from Southey.
Yeah, do you remember Bob Willis going apoplectic and saying the England team should be put in the stocks for not going fast enough in a match that England then went on to win?
That was in 2013, yeah. They got criticised for winning a game too slowly.
Yeah.
I think that was against New Zealand, actually, from memory. Southey in, another hooping in-swinger, a little bit shorter, and Burns can just block this into the onside and come through for a single. Yeah, that was in the tail end of the Andy Flower era, and I often think about that Flower era. I think, Nestles, you and I have talked about this. England didn't know how lucky they were to have that team.
Oh, yes, agreed.
People were complaining.
Take most of it now.
People were complaining that Andrew Strauss didn't go on when he got 100 overnight. People were complaining that Ian Bell only scored hundreds when other people scored hundreds. Despite batting at number 5.
Absurd.
That's quite good, though,
wasn't it? Yeah.
Sibley now facing up to Southey. 2 slips and a gully. Shortish extra cover, Colin de Grandhomme. This is well wide of off stump, and Sibley's not going to be bothering with that. Through to the keeper it goes. There is no run.
I seem to remember, didn't Jeff Boycott back in the mid-60s get dropped after he scored 240 for batting too slowly?
He did, although that did cost England a chance of potentially winning a game. And also, he was not very popular at the time.
Really? I hadn't heard that. No, he was never very popular, our Jeffrey.
Last ball of the over from Southey to Dominic Sibley. Southey lopes back to the end of his run, and he comes from the nursery end, right arm over the wicket. Bowls a little bit of wobble seam, perhaps, because it comes in a little bit to the right-hander. Southey doesn't have an orthodox in-swinger. Sibley blocks into the offside, and there is no run. 2 runs off the over. England 46 for none, need 227 off 55 overs at 4.13 runs and over.
Leia says Williamson still looks like a 12-year-old, a very beady 12-year-old, granted, but a 12-year-old nonetheless. Faronga sent a picture in of a really earlier tweet. Lem Pasco was the son of Yugoslavian immigrants. His original name was Durtanovic, who would have won more than 14 Test caps had he not defected to WSC. A fast bowler with little subtlety but heaps of aggression. He regularly topped 90 miles an hour. Wow. Jay Grover says, I can't remember any of this, and it was the medical staff who told me so. It's hearsay about my own death, but apparently I died whilst on dialysis. I tried to pull all the tubes out, including the catheter, so I could nip outside for a fag. Well, bloody hell, Jay, that's quite dramatic. The fact the NHS kept me alive.
I can see now why people mistook you for Pete Doherty.
Yeah, the fact that the NHS kept me alive means they are between people than me. And he said to me about me going to a Catholic school, I didn't know what cassocks are. Fair dues, but I kind of ignored everything they taught me from about the age of 6. So, you know, Thunderbirds was more important to me than being at that school.
Santner continuing, we've got a very leg-side dominant field with a little bit of turn from outside the leg stump. There's only a slip, a backward point, and extra cover on the offside. There's definitely a short leg in place, and I'll try and give you the rest of the leg side field when the TV director allows me. Santner in, collar up, as he bowls on the leg side, and this is flicked to one of those leg side fielders, the man at short fine leg, Neil Wagner. There is no run. There's also a short mid-wicket. I think there's a man back at deep square leg, and a man maybe sort of at wide-ish mid-on. Straight-ish mid-wicket.
I'm just trying to remember the names of the dwarves at the moment. It's Oreen, Owen, Glowing.
In comes Santner, outside off stump. Burns able to go back and push into that vacant offside and take single. Well, there's Bifur, Boffer, and Bomber.
Thorin Oakenshield.
Look up the main one and tell me he does not.
Oh, you mean the Lord of the Rings?
No. Yes, in the Hobbit.
The main one's Thorin Oakenshield, is it not?
In the Hobbit, the main one.
I think so.
Thorin is the main dwarf in the Hobbit.
Yes, Thorin. There we are.
He looks like, to me anyway, he looks like Kane Williamson.
Santner going round the wicket to Dominic Sibley, who leaves alone through to the keeper. There is no run. Just a hint of straightening from Santner. You've got to be a little bit careful when the finger spinner is bowling on a not especially spin-friendly pitch, that you don't leave one of those and it goes back onto your stumps. It's a slip, short leg, Southey in there at shortish extra cover. Good catcher, Tim Southey. Santner in. This one, again, straightens a little bit. Sibley, I think, has learned a little bit over the years, the year or two he's been in the England side. He's not getting his front pad in the way, making sure the bat can come down straight and meet the ball defensively, which it does. There is no run. Santner in, whirling away again. Goes a little wider on the crease. Little forward press from Sibley, and he does well. Smothers this. Rolls through to slip. There is no.
I think there are no run. Sorry, there are many criticisms you could have of the bloated trilogy, but I could never distinguish any of the Hobbits apart from each other, even at the end of film 3, apart from the Thorin Oakenshield, maybe one other.
The dwarves, you mean?
The dwarves, yes, the dwarves. What did I say? The Hobbits? The dwarves.
Yeah,
yes.
There were 13 of them. It wasn't an easy job. This is outside off stump, and Sibley defends to backward point, and there is no run. Tidy over from Mitch Santner, just the one run off it. England need 226 to win from 54 overs.
Pirate Badshaw says, surely it's not either England nor New Zealand's job to make this interesting for viewers and spectators. Play to the letters of the laws, work to rule. Jay Grover says, 4th 5 live phone-in moral imperatives. I've shat 'em. Grand Theft Auto reckons with deeply sarcastic tones going to call it. Burns and Sibley to win it for England with 25 overs left, taking 32 off the last over against Southey. Very sarcastic.
Well,
Rory Burns is retaking guard. I think we might be about to have a change of bowling. Perhaps we're about to see Neil Wagner wang a few down in Burns' general direction. Yes, indeed.
I think it was Annie of Guerrilla Cricket who, when asked who was likely to be player of the match at the start of the match, went for Rory Burns. Much swimming against the tide, it would be quite something if he managed to see England home, and probably would justify Just for the honour.
Let's be honest, it's going to be Conway. As Wagner in starts with a full delivery, keeping everyone guessing. Burns works to short mid-wicket, and there is no run. Let's jingle up one of the most unique bowlers in world cricket, if indeed unique can be modified, which it can't.
That's Neil Wagner. He's my boss. And when he takes 5 wickets in an over, it was murder.
When Wagner went full Wagner line in the first innings, he's just started conceding runs. This is a fairly orthodox field with 2 slips and a gully, a couple of catches in the point and cover point region, and a short mid-wicket and a mid-off, and 2 men back on the hook. Full delivery again from Wagner. Burns blocks into the onside, there is no run. The 1 wicket Neil Wagner got was when Stuart Broad stepped away to leg and tried to yahoo him over the offside and was bowled.
Andy Zaltzman had a great stat yesterday that there was one other occasion when 2 openers batted with number 11s in the same test, and that was Arthur Morris and Len Hutton in 50-51 Ashes.
Blimey. Outside off stump, left alone by Burns through to the keeper, there is no run. I'm surprised it hasn't happened more.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? And I was just wondering how amazing it would be if it happened for a 3rd time in the same match. And it's not impossible that Burns could be together with Jimmy Anderson with 5 minutes of the match to go.
If we get down to that stage, we'll have had a very, very fun afternoon and evening indeed.
Wouldn't completely rule it out. We've all been here before. We've all seen England's collapses.
Stuart Broad resolutely wearing sunglasses, even though it's not actually very sunny on the England balcony. Outswinger from Wagner. Burns tries to drive, but it's rather early on the stroke. He does try and drive the ball square. I think he was trying to get that into the gap straighter of those 2, or wider of those 2 men in the point region, but didn't time it at all, and there is no run.
Rather as if we were in the film Inception, I've completely lost track of time. Is this likely to be our last over?
There's 2 balls left of the over. We might get one more in.
Okay.
To be honest, I'm not actually sure what the session times are, which is remiss of me. Shortish ball from Neil Wagner hits Rory Burns on the thigh pad, and there is no run. Practices the shot he was trying to play, working it to leg. Very awkward angle for Burns, who tries to set up with that slightly open stance, with Wagner getting the ball to come back into him. Ready thine armpits, Rory.
There are some players that England never really see the best of. I never really feel we've seen the best of Neil Wagner in England. I always felt that about Sunil Gavaskar, actually.
Gavaskar had one extraordinary innings at the Oval.
Yes, one. He did have one innings.
Wagner in, edge, which falls well short of second slip. Played again with soft hands by Rory Burns. I think that's hurt Tim Southey as it bounces up into his hands. He's a good catcher, Southey, but that was well short of him. A good first over from Wagner, a maiden, but a threatening one, unlike some of the ones we saw earlier. England 47 for none, need 226 off 53 overs, and we'll go for one more over, the 3 of us, and then it will be Ed Benson, me doing some summarising, and messages trying to get some tweets in.
On cue, Nakul, Madan Mohan Sharma says, whenever I watch run chase in the 4th innings of a test on English soil, I remember the 79 Oval Test. I was 10 years old then, chasing 438 to win. India with 363 for 1 at one time, but ended at 429 for 8. Sunil Gavaskar scored 221.
Not out as well. They just pulled out of the chase when they was losing partners. Santner in the for Tom Sibley, the close fielder Tom Latham's gone into the offside. That's a well-run single by Sibley and Burns, because it turned a little bit and Sibley wasn't quite sure what to do with it. He just dropped it to leg. Burns set off very quickly and they came through for the single. All sorts of scrambling as BJ Watling had to try and do the fielding that short leg was would have done had he been there. One hand off the glove, gets the throw away kind of quickly, but Burns was comfortably in. Well run. And Tom Latham.
There was an amazing test match in 1973 involving England and New Zealand, where New Zealand was set 478, I think, and got within 38 of it with Bev Congdon scored a massive 170. I think Ken Wadsworth, the keeper, scored a big score.
Santner in, that's a good delivery, and just Rory Burns evades short leg. It had some loop and dip and drift, and Burns prodding hopefully from the crease just about manages to turn it fine of the man at short leg. Very nice from Santner. Not very well played at all by Burns, who wasn't forward or back. Southey moves a little bit squarer at short mid-wicket. Santner in again. Better from Burns, tries to go back. It does turn sharply out of the rough, and Burns has to just abandon his cut shot and just block back to the bowler, but at least he tried to do something there rather than just prodding hopefully. Speaking of England, New Zealand and monster chases, few who saw it will forget Nathan Astle's extraordinary
of
400
course.
in Christchurch. The game was done, but it was an incredible innings.
The laws of gravity didn't exist in that game. It was amazing.
Santner fires this down the leg side, perhaps trying to get Burns overbalancing, but Watling can't take cleanly, and there is no run. It did help that he had an injured Chris Cairns at the other end, who was a batter rather than a number 11, but still. Some of those sixes are still rising. Some of those sixes are still going up somewhere. Santner is in, tosses this up. Very full, and Burns can sweep this rather choppily out to Devon Conway at long leg. They come through for a single, bring Sibley back onto strike. England 49 for none.
I think the target was 551, and I think they got within about 110 of it, which is a fair way short. But 551, it looked like they were going to win at one stage.
It did. I have many memories of Andrew Caddick just getting a crick in his neck watching the ball sail into various parts of Christchurch. Outside off stump, and solidly played by Sibley. Probably didn't need to play at it, but played it nicely enough into the offside. There is no run. An interesting over from Santner. Did cause Burns a few problems. 2 runs off the over. England 49 for none. Need 224 off 52 overs. And the next voice you hear on Ball by Ball will be Ed Benson, and the next voice you hear reading social media messages will be Messi Jez. The required run rate is 224 divided by 51 is 4.39 runs and over. But what I will say, Sibley's been batting as Sibley does, and so forth. But if they're none down at T, Jez, they've given themselves a platform from which to have a dart.
I think you're an internal optimist. I can't see them doing anything other than being happy with the draw here. I really can't. And frankly, I think an hour after tea, they'll just shake hands and walk away.
Ed hasn't joined us yet, so I'll describe this from Wagner, who comes in. Gets a little bit of swing away from Rory Burns again, who defends on the bounce to slip, and there is no run.
I'll just say cheerio for this test match, unless you'd like me to stay on and hold the fort while we're waiting for Ed.
Why don't you do that, Forthy? Thank you.
Yep, okay. In fact, so I won't say goodbye. Here I am.
Yeah, don't leave me alone with Knackle.
Don't leave me this way.
It's probably searching for sandwiches.
Full delivery, swinging again from Wagner through to Watling, left alone by Burns. There is no run. Wagner's not yet gone short. And to be honest, in the first innings, he looked better when he was pitching the ball up than when he bowled Wagner-like and tried to bang the ball in short. Burns in particular played the pull shot very well.
If I'm ever caught with blood on my hands and a dead body in front of me, I would like Ed probably to defend me in court. I think he could persuade anyone of anything. He's a very confident young man, isn't he?
He's excellent, yes. Anybody's body in mind in particular?
Wagner in. Burns has a drive at it flat-footedly. Hands went at the ball and misses, and goes through to BJ Watling. There is no run. Burns has just been uncomfortable a little bit against Mitchell Santner and against Neil Wagner. This left arm outswing line of attack, and then Santner getting the ball to turn and bounce at the footmarks. Probably softened up a little bit by a couple that hit him on the gloves from Tim Southey. He's had another period that he's going to have to battle through the Surrey and England opener.
They'd have missed 34 times legendarily in that Ashes match a couple of years ago.
Wagner in edged, and has that carried to second slip? I think it has. Neil Wagner and Tim Southey think it has. That's a good catch by Southey. It just carried to him, and he takes it above his shoelaces. Neil Wagner, who didn't bowl particularly well in the first innings, has Rory Burns softened up by Tim Southey, made it look very awkward by Mitchell Santner, and the coup de grace applied by Neil, the executioner Wagner. Caught Southey, bowled Wagner is Rory Burns for 25 off the 81 deliveries. England 49 for 1. And the next voice you hear on Ball by Ball after this jingle will be Ed Benson. And we will say goodbye to you, Ian Forth.
Oh, bye-bye. Hopefully see you next time.
See you for 4th. It's been lovely to meet you.
Cheers. Lovely to meet you as well. Really enjoyed it. Thanks, chaps.
You've come in at, well, I say at a good time, Ed. You've robbed yourself of a wicket. I say while Ed is muted.
Hi, Knuckles. Sorry about that. I thought I was going on at 20 past. My mistake, obviously. But I seem to have timed it absolutely perfectly, having walked into the room as a wicket's fallen.
Yeah, it's been...
Those are words I've never heard before. Ed, you're muted.
I have, Knuckle. Sorry, Messi, I have. Many times. Sorry, Knuckle.
Yeah, so Tim Southey got the ball to rear and hit Burns on the hand a couple of times. Santner bowled some nice stuff into the rough, which had Burns fending awkwardly and trying to cut and not managing it. And then Wagner just getting a couple to go away from him, and Burns couldn't hold out this time. It brings to the middle England's number 3. A good player has scored a few runs in County Championship this season, but needs a score to ensure that he's not a victim of the eventual reintroduction of Ben Stokes and Joss Butler.
Zach Croy was a cricket player, but damn.
Was that the sound of a jingle I heard? I'm not sure.
The middle order to open the batting. Now, trapped in the English professional cricket circuit, Zach Crawley must fight to survive.
And Zach Crawley's first ball is left outside the off stump, with Wagner getting one to tail back into him a little bit, but he leaves it alone, and there is no run. Yes, as I said, sorry, Jeremy, it's not your fault. It's not any comment on you that I was late. I wasn't so upset with the last stint that I decided I wouldn't bother coming back. I got my timings wrong.
I've been trying not to take it personally.
Well. It's very good of you. I appreciate that. Well, anyway, the game right now is at the wicket, and, still all 3 results, all 4 perhaps, are possible as Wagner bowls, and that's on the stumps, and that's defended out to the man fielding at gully for no run. That's the end of the over, 49 for 1.
So if that's the end of the over, we'll go back to Jay Grover, who says, I'm pretty sure I can't have been dead when I tried to go out and roll a fag, but I remember not. Apparently I just sweared a lot. Well, that's always the case, Jay. You know you're alive then. Neymar Butland says, I can't believe that you don't know Catholic dwarves wore hobbit habits. And Jago says, one man's dart is another man's thrash. Thank you very much, Forthy. Also, our weapons of choice are plastic pint glasses and your bust. Well, he's getting a much better deal than you are, Ed, I must say.
What was my deal, duel-wise?
Well, I don't know. I think that there were various sorts of weapons, but none of them as good as a pint glass.
A plastic pint cup. Come on. Anyway, change of bowling from the elegant gentility of Colin de Grandon to the looming threat of this man.
And that's the story of how Kyle Jameson became a man.
Well, how elegant that song is compared to the first ball of Kyle Jameson, which regrettably, like his first spell, was too wide, too short, and left outside the off stump by Dominic Sibley. I don't think he's quite got his radar right today, Jeremy. Would you agree?
No, his first spell was the worst bowling he's had this Test match, I think.
Yes, I think so.
Possibly in his Test career.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was superb in the first innings, particularly in his first couple of spells.
He was, and in fact he got Joe Root with the very first ball that he bowled yesterday as Jameson's in, and that's also too wide and just left alone by Sibley outside the off stump, and there's no run. Right on the money straight away he was yesterday, which makes it so unusual that he hasn't been on the money today. But an incredible Test career to start with, and everyone is allowed a bad day at work occasionally.
Indeed. Well,
and his bad day was, a run of maidens, not especially threatening maidens, but maidens nonetheless. His sin was bowling too far wide of off stump to defensive batters.
That's correct. Absolutely right. Well, Jameson tried to correct that first spell. He's got 0 for 6 off 7.2 over so far, and he comes in. That is a better line, more on the off stump, but still wide enough for Sibley to leave. So he thought about playing it, and it's gone through to a Watling, and there is no run.
He still has a test bowling average of 14.59, by the way.
You'd take that, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
if offered. If offered. The game has... That wicket has somewhat brought the game to life. It was slightly meandering, I have to say. We were looking towards a sort of shake hands around tea time, or perhaps slightly afterwards, but that wicket has just enticed New Zealanders to think that perhaps there are 9 more wickets that can be wizened out of this pitch, which has been, I must say, as Jameson bowls, and that's a bounced, and Sibley goes to think about cutting, and he saw the bounce, and he's left it, and a big waft outside the off stump. Very uncharacteristic of Dom Sibley, but there's no run there. It is a bit...
It's that extra bounce of Jameson that is, and that little bit of extra seam movement that forced Sibley into that, because he thought that was going to be a ball he could easily just defend off the back foot, but then he followed it with his hands. Jameson has this ability to get the ball to move away from the right-hander off the seam. We saw that he got Sibley with a very good delivery in the first innings. Got Root with that very good delivery that you talked about with exactly the same ball.
Yes, certainly he didn't want to be late for yesterday's play, as my friend was, as that's left outside the off stump, and Sibley again being watchful. I'm not sure, Knuckle, he was quite going to defend that last ball. It looked to me like it was half thoughts of a full-blooded cut, but luckily he pulled out, because otherwise he might have got a top edge. And there is that extra bounce from Kyle Jameson, who I have to say, again, I saw him for the first time yesterday. He's absolutely massive, even compared to the other people on the field. He's huge.
Yeah, it's not just that he's 6'8". He's not like, Stephen Finn.
Quite right.
Stephen Finn is 6'7" and is quite lanky, relatively speaking. There's just so much of Kyle Jameson.
Yeah. He'd eat you without salt, Kyle Jameson. Anyway, in for the last ball of his over, and that's outside the off stump and left. So another maiden for Jameson, but not making the batsman play too often. Still a little bit too wide, though slightly better than his first spell, 49 for 1.
So, Jay Grover is trying to goad you, Ed. I recommend you don't rise to the bait, but he says, don't believe Ed's shit. He doesn't come through on his commitments. He's soft and all. And Madam Mohan Sharma says it appears that the soul of Pujara has entered into the body of Burns. Leah says, is this it? Is this the start of the spectacularly entertaining collapse I so desire?
Well, we all desire that. As my friend said to me yesterday, as Wagner starts his second over his spell, and that's defended off the front foot, there's no run, third over, correction. As I said to my friend said to me yesterday, when I said this match is meandering to a draw, he said to me, quite rightly, because they then did, never underestimate England's ability to collapse from absolutely anywhere.
It's a hard-held belief by every England supporter that it's going to happen sooner or later. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah.
Yes.
Competitive pessimism among cricket fans of various nations is almost as widely practiced a sport as cricket.
Wagner's in, and that's outside the off stump. The last one tailed back in from his over the wicket line of the attack to the right hander. That one just went straight on, and there's no run, straight through to BJ Watling. Is that true, though, Jeremy, in relation to Australian sports fans? Because there is this competitive pessimism amongst England cricket fans, but I'm not sure if that's shared by those across the water, as it were.
It depends on experience to a large extent. Generally speaking, I don't think it's as dire in Australia, but if we've had a couple of bad matches, we just think it's going to keep happening.
Wagner in to Crawley, he bowls, and that's left, well left, outside the off stump by Zach Crawley, taking notes out of Dom Sibley's book and trying to leave everything that he does not have to play. I think we can fairly say they're not going for these runs.
No, and again, I was talking earlier about sort of defensive decision making and doing the thing that you are least likely to be criticised for. Given how Zach Crawley got out in the first innings, if he tries to have a drive at one early and gets out, you don't even have to bother writing the paper.
It's true. It would be very much rinse and repeat of the various comments that came out in the weekend press as Wagner's in. That's defended by Zach Crawley off the front foot. Bowling more at the stumps, Neil Wagner, and he's unsurprising perhaps that he's got the wicket as he's been making the one making the batsman play in this scenario. Jameson and even Southey to a certain extent just a little bit too wide, and given the mindset of these batsmen in general and particularly in this game, you've got to make Dom Sibley and Zach Crawley play, or they won't do it themselves.
Well, particularly Sibley, whose entire game is and has been throughout first-class cricket has been leave as much as possible outside off stump.
Wagner into Crawley, and that's left outside the off stump in a theme that may be recurring throughout this day. Zach Crawley really, as Knuckle was quite rightly saying, needs a score. There's huge, enormous potential shown by that enormous double ton that he made last year, but it's fair to say that without that, it's been a fairly fallow test career.
Indeed.
He's one of those batters I think gets probably more slack because he looks good. Yeah,
and he does look bloody good, and we're all hoping he'll make a score here today as he's facing up to Neil Wagner's final ball of his third over, and that is driven, and that was an in-swinger by Neil Wagner, and well bowled and relatively well played. The ball tailed back in and hit the inside half of Zach Crawley's bat and bounced off the pad into the offside for no run. So that's the end of Wagner's over, yet to concede a run in his 3 overs, 49 for 1.
Earl Choppiner says, soft hands and bent knees in the slips, hard lengths and braced knee on the bowling crease. The complete Tim Southey for you. He is an impressive cricketer, Tim Southey. Jay Grover says, I'm a wee fellow, so I'm going for the swiftness of the plastic pint glass shards wearing Ed down when he wields his heavy solipsistic bust. You're very, very keen on the word solipsism, aren't you, Jay?
I'm not even sure I know what that means.
I think it's to do with bigging oneself up, as it were.
That's driven by Dominic Sibley for the 9th over of Kyle Jamieson's day, and that's driven off the back foot into the gully for no run.
It's only solipsism if it comes from the Solipes region of France. Otherwise, it's just sparkling selfishness.
Does it have a vintage attached to it?
I'm being shown up for the uneducated man that I am today. It was a discussion about legal Latin. I didn't know any of it.
I think that's a very good sign for me, Ed.
You think it's a good sign?
Absolutely. The more Latin you learn, the more detached you become.
Sibley leaves outside the off stump, and there's no run. I did do a Latin GCSE. Well, Knuckle did most of a classics degree, I think, if I recall correctly. And it's very nice for you to say that I'm more attached to the planet than him. I'm not sure many people would agree with that, but
that wasn't my intent. Sorry.
Yeah, no.
I got a Latin O level at my third attempt. My father was a Latin teacher. And
was he?
Tearing what little was left of his hair out.
Third attempt. What happened in the first 2 times? Too good for school, presumably. Too complicated for the markers to assess. Jamieson over the wicket to Sibley, flicked into the leg side. Now there'll be runs here, one only to find leg, and Sibley will be quite happy to get off strike, and Zach Crawley will be quite happy to probably try and get his first run. He's on strike now.
Every
50 for 1.
Every time he's straightened his line, Kyle Jamieson, he's also managed to bowl it too short, and Dom Sibley's very happy playing off his hips.
Yes,
he's just not quite got it right.
He just it is an example, exactly as you say, of just not quite having it right. I wonder if the angle that he's bowling at, that means that he tries to bowl straight, and perhaps with the slope as well, the ball just drags down to the leg side, and we've all watched matches at Lords where bowlers don't quite get it right. It's unusual, given that he got it so right in the first innings, that he's having trouble today, but he certainly is, and he's going to be persisted with, however, and it's the 4th ball of his 9th over. James bowls, that's outside the off stump. Zach Crawley leaves.
Yeah,
I think a sort of an epitome of Kyle Jamieson's spell. He's bowled 1-2 straight that gets flicked into the leg side, or one that's miles outside the off stump, and the batsman can just leave it alone.
Well, he wreaked havoc from the nursery end in the first innings, and he started off today from the nursery end, but was bowling everything too wide of off stump. And now from the pavilion end, he's either bowling everything. He's managing to fail slightly both sides of the wicket. And again, yes. I think you're right with the slope. From the distant pavilion end, the ball's going into the right-hander down the slope.
Well, we know from experience as Jameson is in and he bowls, that's a much better delivery. That one tailed back in and just hit the inside half of Jack Crawley's bat, quite correctly defending it, because otherwise he might have been a target for LBW there, but it's well defended and there's no run. We know from experience that bowlers often try and hang it a little bit further outside the off-stump at Lords because they're worried about the slope, and that weirdly makes facing them a little bit easier because their batsmen can just sort of leave as they've been doing here. And that's the sort of line he should be bowling, and that one tailed in quite significant.
It's good length as well, that Jamieson length. He's a little bit like Morning Morkel. When Morkel figured out how to pitch the ball 6 inches further up, he became at times unplayable.
Same with Stuart Broad. Almost all bowlers, I think, are a little bit better when batsmen feel they have to play. As Jameson comes in, and that's a better delivery too. That one nipped back down the slope, a little bit too high. Hit Crawley on the pads, half-hearted appeal, but there'll be no review there. That's the end of Carl Jamison's 9th over. It is 50 for 1.
Yes. Okay. If I was Williamson, I'd want to bring McGrath on right now. So Jay Grover accuses me of not reading all his funny things, and has therefore declared me his enemy. So maybe there's another duel in the offing. Leah says, I can't wait for Germany to get test status, then cricket Twitter will learn what it means to complain about your team. So Germany is obviously high in the league of whingers about their own team. Al Armstrong Brown wants to know how come Wagner is pronounced Wagner and not Wagner. Well, he spells it all the same, but I know what you mean. And it's just he is. Madame Sharma says, if England continue playing like this... Oh, sorry.
Wagner bowls. That's an outside edge from Dominic Sibley that has flown past. I wonder if third slip got a little hand to it. Tim's loudly there, but it's flown past him, and it's gone to the boundary for one of these.
2 + 2 is our man.
Let's have a look. It was good delivery, bit wide. The first one that Sibley's had a real chase at, and no, it was outside the hands of Southey, who made a really good effort, full length to his right to grab it.
That's smartly bowled by Wagner, because he held that sort of cross seam, slightly wobble seam, so it didn't come back into to Sibley as he might have been expecting.
Yes.
Smart bowling from Wagner.
Smart bowling, but I think we would agree, poor shot. I mean, it was quite wide outside the off stump. It was not at a drivable length. And rarely for Sibley, he just felt that he had to chase it, and it indeed was chased all the way to the boundary, I suppose, so it's 4 all in the same. That's an outside edge, maybe? No, not. Just beats the outside edge and goes straight through to Watling. So I think we're seeing here the difference that Neil Wagner's made. He's caused, in his last 2 overs, more problems than the remainder of the New Zealand attack this innings.
Yeah, barring a little bit of Santner to Rory Burns, who did cause a few problems out of the rough. And yeah, Sibley seems to have... I'm not entirely sure if is he worried about the ball coming back into him, that he thinks he has to drive? Is he thinking the ball's going to be a little bit fuller than he is? Because those are 2 very un-Dom Sibley shots.
Indeed, and given his control in this innings as Wagner's into him again, and this time he is defending a ball that was on the stump, so that's well judged and well played out to Gully, and there's no run. I think it's interesting given how reticent he's been to drive at anything. We've seen 2 quite expansive strokes there, not in his repertoire or in the match situation, given what we've seen from him.
No, and he doesn't look comfortable playing them. He's not one of those players who is a particularly... He's okay when he gets going a little bit. He drives square quite nicely, but he's not a natural driver of the ball. It's not like he's Ollie Pope, who plays that shot very well.
Absolutely.
Interesting, short mid-wicket.
Right, well, the third slip's come out, so there's only 2 slips in now for Neil Wagner to Dom Sibley, and that's on the pads and flicked. Well, attempted to be flicked by Dom Sibley, but he doesn't get quite enough on it. It just dribbles out to the square leg region. If he'd got a little bit more bat on it, that would have been a 4, a leg glance down to fine leg, but he didn't, so he'll feel he's missed out there. And that, I suggest, is the sucker ball from Neil Wagner. He didn't, in fact, get any bat on it at all. It just cannon off the pads. But that's what he was looking for. He's bowled them outside the off stump, but then he's looking to hoop one back in and try and get Sibley LBW. But he doesn't get his radar quite right on that occasion. It was a little bit too straight. No chance of LBW there. As Wagner comes into him again, and that one is outside the off stump and defended to mid-on, and there is no run.
It's nicely played by Sibley, because it did come back into him a little bit, and after looking a little bit shaky earlier in the over, that was a very solid forward defensive. There is such a thing as being positive in defence, and that was a good positive defensive stroke.
That's quite right. Full face of the bat, stamping down on the red cherry. But Neil Wagner has only conceded 4 runs off his 4 overs, and that was what you might call it's not a chance because there was no slip there, but it was a genuine nick from Sibley, and he'll complete his 4th over, and he beats Sibley again, who's just hanging his bat out there, goes forward to 1 outside the off stump, trying to defend, and it nips past the edge. So an excellent over from Neil Wagner that has moved England on to 54 for 1. Crawley still on a blob, Sibley on 19.
So, Madan Mohan Sharma says, if England continue playing like this and the required rate goes to 6 runs per over, then New Zealand will make the life of the batsman very miserable. They'll make an umbrella of fielders around the batsman and survival will be difficult. It's interesting, even after such a long period of slow play, the run rate's still only about 4.7 runs per over. Jay Grover explains that solipsism is a word for our times, and no one lets me say daft Bradman.
Jamieson's continuing, and that's flicked off the pads by Crawley, and he was looking for his first run there, and he'll be a bit frustrated because he's hit that straight to the man fielding at square leg, and timed it reasonably well. And had he got a little bit more forward of square, that would have probably been a boundary to get him off the mark, but as is such, he remained on naught.
And that's the kind of shot that can easily bring about a wicket next ball. You hit that really nicely, straight to the fielder. You're thinking, oh God, well, when am I going to get my next run? You chase one that you shouldn't be chasing.
Exactly, and he's now had 12 balls without scoring. Now, he's not a batsman who normally is particularly worried about his scoring rate, but that must be nagging on his mind now as Jamieson's into him, and that one's outside the off stump, and Crawley thinks about playing, but correctly decides to leave it alone as it was angled in and then just moved away a little bit after it had pitched. So, a better delivery from Kyle Jamieson, although it's arguably still perhaps a little bit too wide, but Crawley correctly judges it.
Grab his face width wide. We introduced a new unit of measure yesterday, which is the width of Grubby's face.
It's a pretty personal measurement.
It is, yeah. It's known as a Grubby.
Ear to ear or sort of front to back?
Cheek to cheek.
Right.
Cheek to cheek.
Right.
Cheek to cheek. Well, let's see if this one is a Grubby's face which way is Jamieson bowls, and that's the right line. So that is literally on the off stump and perhaps fractionally short, but causing Zach Crawley to play and forcing him to make a decision whether to attack or defend, and he defends, and that is no run scored off that ball either. So 14 balls without scoring, Zach Crawley now.
I think that's pretty much the definition of a good length, though, because Crawley came half forward and it hit him on the splice of the bat. He's a tall man, Zach Crawley, 6'5", so you need to drag your length back a little bit.
It's very much tall on tall at the moment, Jamieson to Crawley. And he's just pulled out of his run up there. I don't know if Zach Crawley has seen something behind the bowler's arm that he wants amended. There aren't actually many members in the pavilion. They were spread out around the whole of Lords yesterday, and that meant everyone got to enjoy the members' prices, which I'm very grateful for, as I've already mentioned. Although I wasn't grateful for when I woke up at 9 o'clock this morning with a splitting headache. That's obviously been dealt with, as Zach Crawley is now remarking his guard, and he's standing up to Kyle Jamieson to bowl the fourth ball of his 10th over. England 54 for 1, chasing 273. That's well bowled by Jamieson outside the off stump, and Crawley just leaves that alone. Again, a little bit too wide, and Crawley not tempted by that little tempter to have a flash at it and try and get off that big naught that he is on currently. It's quite hard to say, Knackle, who is more in need of a score. Crawley, Sibley, I suppose Burns has done that now. Pope or Lawrence. I mean, there's a lot of uninked in names in this English batsman lineup.
and you've got Stokes and Butler to come back in. There's going to be some spaces filled. I mean, Lawrence did get a couple of scores in India and look okay.
Jamieson is in, and that is driven quite beautifully by Zach Crawley, and it's hit the man at cover and bobbled out of his hands, and he will get off his blob. So he gets a single. Well played, and it was a full delivery that was there for the drive. So good shot selection that has taken him to one.
He's good at that shot, the off drive and the cover drive. But again, I know he got a single out of it, but that's it's an excellent bit of fielding by Williamson, who's a fine fielder, and it's the kind of thing that can, as I was saying earlier, add to the frustration. You've hit that really well, and a very good bit of fielding. The value of tight ground fielding can be very high in Test cricket. It's saved 3 runs, but more importantly, it's just added to that little bit of frustration of Zach Crawley, perhaps.
Well, Jamieson's coming in to complete his over to Dom Sibley. He bowls, and that's swung quite significantly, but Sibley watches that, plays it with the full face of the bat out to the man fielding at mid-wicket. It's the end of the over, 55 for 1.
So Jay has now become concerned for you. He says, I'm slightly worried about Ed. He sounds a wee bit sort of voce. Ed, have you been burned by your new life choices? El Troponas tells us...
I'm just being polite, Messi. I'm just being polite.
And Grubby was doing Whispering Ted Lowe yesterday, so it's all very, very quiet and gentlemanly.
Yes.
El Chopanos says the BCCI official has just informed us that England aren't going for the win because they are behind on the boundary countback numbers. In case of the tie. Excuse me.
No, I mean, I must admit, I never expected England to go to the win, and I think it's a totally fair option. Try and bat the day out as Wagner bowls, and that swings back into Zach Crawley, who's defending quite correctly off the front foot of the offside, and there's no run.
A question.
All that smoke from the fire behind you, Messi.
It must be. The question as to whether Gorilla's going to broadcast any PSL matches. I don't know, but I suspect that's unlikely. Knuckle, do you know?
I suspect there's too much other cricket on at the same time, because we are definitely covering the remainder of this series, the World Test Championship final, England's One Day International and T20 series against Pakistan and Sri Lanka.
As Wagner's into Crawley, and that swings back into him and is again defended with the full fate of the bat out to mid-off, and there's no run.
And then England's series against Test series against India. Probably some of the IPL when that resumes, and the T20 World Cup. I think just resources mean that unfortunately we're not going to be able to cover the PSL or the CPL indeed.
That is a hell of a lot of cricket, it must be said, even without the addition of the PSL. And if you were so minded to help that work continue, as Wagner's going to bowl his third ball into Zach Crawley over the wicket, and that's outside the off stump and left alone, you can, of course, and please do, support us on Patreon. I don't know what the correct address is now, Knackle.
Patreon.com/Gorilla Cricket, and there's various options there that you can slip us a few pounds a month or a bit more if you like, and you can get some various perks, but mostly just helping us out and helping us keep providing free cricket coverage. You can also go to Woodstock's website, woodstockcricket.co.uk. Let me just get the address right, that would help, of our sponsor.
Well, while you find that, Neil Wagner's going to bowl his fourth ball to Zach Crawley, and that's outside the off stump and left alone by Zach Crawley, and it's gone straight through to Watling, and there's no run.
Yeah, woodstockcricket.co.uk, and you can get 25% off any of their fine bats or pads or anything else that they sell with the code GC Radio, which will help us out, and we'll let them know that we sent you, which is all very good. You can also go to our shop, which is linked to on our website, and buy some merchandise. It's all good.
Absolutely. So Wagner is going to bowl to Crawley. He's over the wicket. That's left. Again, a bit too wide outside the off stump. It goes through to Watling. And as Gorilla Cricket proves, the best things in life are free, but money, that's what we want, as our jingle goes, because unfortunately, though we provide it free, it isn't free to produce. We've got Knackle in our little studio with this sort of Star Trek style setup. We've got all the sorted costs of doing this remotely and in person, and we really do appreciate your support, and if you are supporting us, thank you. And please give generously, because it is, if nothing, the generosity of listeners that enables this production to happen. But Wagner hasn't been very generous, conceded only 4 runs off his 5 overs so far. He's going to complete his 5th over. That's on the pads. Oh, and that's off the outside edge, and that's gone to Gully and bounced out of Gully's hand. And they've gone through for a single. Neil Wagner's hands on heads, thinking if he had not got that outside edge, he would have been plumb LBW, and he's right. But Crawley did, and he's got 2. He'll be on strike the next over. Sibley's on 19, 56 for 1.
We've seen 2 very economical spells today from Kyle Jamieson, who's none for 8 off 10, and Neil Wagner 1 for 5 off 5. Wagner has been by an order of magnitude more threatening.
I'm just over on YouTube. There's some discussion of what was an extraordinarily eventful Grand Prix. John Wilkinson says he was hearing there may be some showers later on. How's the overhead condition, and what's everyone's thoughts on a possible result? I can tell you I just updated the Met Office forecast, which previously had been showing rain around 7 o'clock and now is showing nothing more than 10% chance of rain until the close of play. So hopefully we'll be okay for that. I think we'll fizzle out into a draw. It's my personal view.
Well, there's a bowling change. It's not north, it's...
Very good. After this ball.
You've ruined it. Outside the off stump. Gone through to Watling. There's no run.
It's only a whimsical notion to fly with Tim Southey to tonight. I probably won't fly with Tim Southey. And again, I'm just mine.
Southey switched ends.
Knackle's quite right. Sorry, Knackle.
I think has Southey switched ends again?
I think so.
You switched back to the pavilion end.
And I would suggest to you, Knackle, that if they're not going to get a breakthrough through Wagner and Southey before tea, because that's bowled and defended off the front foot by Crawley, into the offside, there's no run. It looks to me, as Messi says, that we're going to fizzle out into a draw, and perhaps hands will be shaken at around 5:30 today.
I think if you're, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you might as well keep going if you're New Zealand, I suppose. You know, if nothing else, just to get some miles into the bowlers' legs and ahead of the World Test Championship final. You know, something weird could happen.
And as you say,
How
Knackle,
long
it's
is
on
the
you.
break till Edgbaston? Sorry.
It's basically back to back.
Next week. Southey into Crawley, and it's beautifully bowled, and that is caught in the gully. Suckered Crawley into a big booming drive, takes the outside edge, and that breakthrough we were talking about, well, Tim Southey has made it. Crawley has gone for 2, England 56 for 2.
I have to say, I quite like Zach Crawley, but that was one of the least impressive innings I've seen.
Yes.
Probably the least impressive innings I've seen for him, even more so than some of his very short stays in India. He never looked comfortable at any point during that innings.
No, he was quite lucky to get that too.
Yeah, and he's been quite flat-footed, and he has been frustrated by the fact that the few he has timed have gone straight to fielders. We saw the flick to square leg. We saw the drive that was well fielded, and he's had a little sort of flash push at that one. Has fallen in similar-ish manner in both innings, which will also not help. And that was a pretty simple, as you say, sucker punch from Southey. Good catch, or a catch made to look pretty simple by Henry Nicholls.
Well, it's a bowler's wicket because he did draw him into the drive, but it was a poor shot. No real foot movement, just sort of throwing the arms through the ball, and that's exactly what New Zealand were looking for. And it's going to bring a new batsman to the crease who will be jingled up imminently. But Messi, some tweets if we have a moment.
Yeah, well, Stephen Kelk can take credit for that wicket. He just put on YouTube, he was sad because now Crawley has a run. We won't be hearing the term blob again for a while. And then he said, "Oh, I spoke too soon, facepalm." And Colin says, "Yeah, nice one, Stephen Falk. That took seconds." And I think you can take some credit for it too, Ed, because you were talking about the need for a wicket to liven things up, really, weren't you?
I take credit for everything, Messi, but
fair enough.
The new batsman's the England captain.
His voice is high-pitched and ginger hair like a pict, but massive runs he has hit, so there's that. Introduce yourself.
Joe Root.
Introduce yourself.
Joe Root.
Introduce yourself.
Joe Root, actually.
Yes, it's Joe Root, England's noticeably, in this game with the absence of Begsoat's best batsman. It was really noticeable yesterday when the averages of the team come up. He's the only one, I think, in this side who's in the 40s as it currently stands, and you think that he needs to stick around here and guide England to a successful defence of not a successful defence, to a successful draw, which it would be in this case as Southey bowls to Root. That's on the pads and flicked out to mid-on, and there's no run. You think he's going to have to stay at the wicket for at least an hour?
If nothing else, Joe Root might... You know, England aren't going for the win, but that doesn't mean you can just try and block every ball.
Yeah.
Joe Root is naturally someone who will pick up singles and just might sort of break this suffocating air that New Zealand have put on, have sort of generated around this innings.
Yeah, there's no concern when Sibley and Crawley are batting together about strike rotation. That's not their game, that's fair enough. It does make it easier for the bowlers to bowl at you as Southey is into Root, and that is left outside the off stump. And there is no run.
To be fair, I don't think it actually... I would agree with that. I think it was more important for Crawley to try and do it, and he didn't at any point. I think Sibley, as you're right, Sibley is very happy just leaving as many as possible, and doesn't actually matter. He doesn't actually mind how many deliveries you bowl at him, but somebody like Crawley, who is more of a stroke maker. But I think Root and Sibley is quite a nice combination in terms of temperament at the crease.
Yes, certainly. And it's certainly true that Sibley isn't unconcerned with scoring runs, but Joe Root, the England captain, is a prime strike rotator, and I think we can expect a little bit more busyness, I think is the phrase they often use in these circumstances. Southey's into Root, and that's defended off the front foot. Nothing you can do with that. It's gone to gully, and there's no run. It's difficult in these situations, Jeremy, because the question is always: do you go into your shell, or do you try and play your natural game? And then if you fall either way, then if you fall either way, you have critics one side or the other, don't you? You know, saying you should have done the other.
The term "natural game" is always an interesting one. I think if anybody plays anything other than the game they know, then they're asking for trouble. It's a question of how much you go after the ball that you don't need to go after. That's the only thing for me that separates the two.
It's true. Well, 44 overs left today. We won't get all of those in because we never bloody do, as Neil Wagner bowls to the England captain, Dominic Sibley. And he's beaten outside the off stump, and it's certainly true to say that Wagner is causing Sibley a lot more problems than the other bowlers. He's a very good player, very good bowler, and he has the left arm angle, but it certainly seems that Sibley hasn't quite lined him up, Knappel, in the way that he's lined up Carl Jameson, for example.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He's not just able to sort of have his head on the line of off stump and just let it go past the fact that Wagner's getting the odd one to swing and the odd one to carry on with the arm. I'll come to that after this ball.
56 for 2, and he's beaten outside the outside edge again. Sibley, that one's a little bit shorter and flies past the outside edge. Can't really handle the VAG.
He's trying to play for the in swing, but then the ones that are going, he's then not reading the one that Wagner doesn't try and swing so much, or just doesn't, or the ball that just doesn't swing. And what's impressive is that Wagner is bowling really well without having once tried to bowl, Wagner-like and bang the ball in halfway down. I suppose they both modes of attack make the other more dangerous. It's been a very, very good spell indeed.
It has been a very good spell, and it was much needed by New Zealand, who were sort of meandering at 49 for none, as that one is defended by Sibley off the front foot, and there's no run.
Good question from Wiggy. He says, when is tea? I suspect it's at 4 o'clock. Do we know that for sure?
No, I haven't seen session times. So we're kind of winging it here, to be honest.
No, winging it never. Highly professional.
By the fact that they're looking at the clock, I suspect that it is going to be 4 o'clock. Right. Which would make some sense.
Wagner is into Sibley, and that one is a bit straighter and a bit shorter, and Sibley's just able to nurdle that into the onside, and there's no run.
Umbrenuova says someone should wake Root up. He must have nodded off not being used to not batting within half an hour of England starting.
I wonder, Knackle, if in fact we're going to take tea at 5-2, because we did, of course, go off at quarter to.
That's right, yes, lunch. We came back on at 25 past 1, so yes, maybe they will.
So this might be the last over before tea. If so, still even Stevens as far as it goes. The draw definitely the favourite as Wagner bowls, and that is driven by Sibley, but off the inside half of the bat into the onside, and there's no run. So draw certainly, I think, Jeremy, the favourites. New Zealand still have a sniff.
Very much so, yes.
I don't think England have a sniff at all. They're not really going for it, which is, I think, fair enough.
Well, I just saw Wagner has just sprinted back to the end of his mark to try and maybe just get this one ball in.
One more in.
Yeah.
Well, Wagner's going to bowl the last ball if it's over. That is in. It's down the leg side. It's gone through to BJ Watling on the bounce as Sibley tried to leg glance that before, didn't get anything on it. It's the end of the over. It's 56 for 2. We wait to see whether it is tea.
Looks like we're getting
a couple of tweets then. Madame Mohan.
And it looks like we're getting one more in, I think.
Who'd asked us about the PSL said, thanks for the response. I feel delighted. Your platform was the best and I enjoy thoroughly. I'm from India. Thank you very much.
That's very grateful to hear that.
Grand Theft Auto says, I think the England first choice team will go for the win, but with places in the 11 really at stake, the players must want to prove they can be depended on in a losable match and have half an eye on their average.
Well, it's also partly who they are. I mean, that's also true, and I was talking a little bit about the defensive decision-making, but it's also who they are. You know, if you are Ben Stokes or you're Joss Buttler, you know you have those extra gears. It's more difficult if you are not a player of that ilk. It is, by the way, T. They weren't able to quite get that extra over in, but New Zealand will be the happier. England defended doggedly and solidly for most of the session, but the introduction of Neil Wagner sparked some life into New Zealand in a different way to normal, actually. And Mitchell Santner, he didn't get a wicket, Mitchell Santner. I thought he bowled very well to Rory Burns, and kind of he and Southey softened Burns up before Wagner got Rory Burns just pushing at one, and a good low catch by Tim Southey, and then Zach Crawley was really tied down by Wagner and Jameson, and then in another case of New Zealand very much bowling as a full attack, complementing each other, had a flat-footed drive, a wide one from Southey, very much as in the first innings, this time edged to gully rather than to the keeper for a deeply unimpressive 2 off 25. Dom Sibley has been Dom Sibley, 19 not out of 83 balls, has looked not wholly untroubled by Neil Wagner, but has looked very solid and has a very clear idea of what he's trying to do. Joe Root has only faced 3 balls. There have been 4 byes and 6 leg byes, probably some of which should have been wides. Tim Southey, 9 overs, 1 for 21. Kyle Jameson, 10 overs, none for 8, but probably hasn't bowled as well as those figures suggest. Colin de Grandhomme,
because he hasn't bowled well at all.
No, he's bowled generally too wide. Better in this spell, better in this third spell of his. Colin de Grandhomme, very reminiscent of the World Cup final, really. 4 overs, 2 maidens, none for 5. Mitchell Santner bowled well, I thought, in his 3 overs. Troubled Rory Burns from outside, in the rough outside the left-handers off stump. 3 overs, none for 7. And pick of the bowlers, Neil Wagner, 6 overs, 4 maidens, 1 for 5. We'll get out of your way for 15 minutes or so and go back to the interview that we were playing earlier. Tony Bishop talking to Ashley Gray and Anindya Dutta about their respective books and authors. So they went off at 5-2. We'll be back on in about 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes or so, for the final session of what could still be an interesting game. New Zealand need 8 wickets to win, and the other side of the equation, I think, is now academic. But see you in about 12 minutes.
And also had a quote down the bottom, and the quote said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." And it just felt like he was speaking to me, because he was South African. The book was about South Africa. It just felt like, a very profound moment for me. And I just thought, well, okay, I just got to do it. It's all you can do in those situations. Anyway, yeah.
So ultimately, Nelson Mandela helped you to get to that's quite a story. And Indo, what about you? I mean, your book again is certainly. All of them really, but certainly Wizards. It is about a range of different personalities and personal stories that are wrapped in the statistics of that show achievement ultimately. Who stood out for you, perhaps, not just for achievement, but as a personality, where you felt that the backstory around the individual was as big, or perhaps even bigger than the sporting achievements themselves? Was there anyone in there you'd pull out?
Yeah, there'd be a couple of them. The first one is the person I start the book with, and who just historically happened to be chronologically the first Indian spinner as well, Palvankar Balu, and it's an incredibly interesting story from a sociological point of view, from a political point of view as well, besides the cricket. So he was not only India's first spin bowler, he was also from the untouchable caste of Indian society. And at a time when Mahatma Gandhi had not even started his campaign against untouchability, here was Balu, the best spinner in the country by far, known in places as far off as Surrey, where nobody had ever seen him bowl. But
they wanted Surrey.
Him. Yes, and they wanted him. They wanted him.
The wild back of beyond.
Exactly. From where he was in Pune. Yeah.
Oh right. Well, yeah.
Yeah. So it was interesting, and then so how he came through that whole sociological barrier, if you like, and then became the famous man that he was, and I think that's an incredible story. And then he became a politician. He was a failed politician, but that's in the end he sort of. He went out of politics, but then he became unofficially the first untouchable to ever captain a team of Hindus, which was just an incredible achievement. So I just found that fascinating, and also his craft, of course. And then there was the story of Subhash Gupte, who's rated probably the best spinner in the world at his peak, when the administrators basically threw his career away, and he left the game disgusted, went off to the West Indies, never came back. It's just these kinds of stories made the whole book for me really fulfilling. And just on a question that you were asking earlier, I was just thinking about that in terms of when you were asking how you write it, and Ashley was talking about his struggles with Lawrence Rowe's chapter. So